Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, November 18th, 2008 meeting of the Glendale City Council. Mr. City Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero. Here. Weaver. Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here. And Councilmember Quintero, you have the flag salute this evening.
Well, I would like to have probably the best water polo team in America come to the podium there and lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Someone come to the mic and start. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for this evening's invocation. Let us pray this evening for the safety of those who have been touched by the horrific fires that engulfed parts of our precious state this last week. We pray for the safety of our brave firefighters and other personnel who have answered the cry for help and responded with full force to the disasters as they unfolded. The French playwright Molière once wrote that every good act is charity. A person's true wealth hereafter is the good that he or she does in this world to his or her fellow human beings. Let us pray that we can all find in our hearts enough kindness to extend good acts of charity to those who lost their homes and belongings in this their time of need. Let us pray for our own city's safety and prosperity and wisdom of this council to make the best decisions for our residents and businesses. Amen.
Mr. Kasakian, could we hear your report, please?
The agenda for the November 18, 2008 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, November 13, 2008 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Could we go to the first item, please?
First item is presentation and appointments. At 3A is the agenda preview for the meeting of November 25, 2008.
Thank you. And with that, let's go to our Assistant City Manager, Bob McFall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. There is no specific action items on the Housing and Redevelopment Agency agenda. There is, I believe that currently the forecast agenda shows that the Director of Planning will be doing the proposed ordinance amending Title 1, 2, and 30 and the South Brand Boulevard specific plan at the council meeting. I believe that's now being considered for a study session, though. Mr. City Manager, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yes, Mr. City Manager.
This might be an appropriate time to make a couple of corrections to our agenda. One is that item 8B, that's the discussion of the proposed Pacific Pool development work at Pacific Park. Given the prospective length of tonight's meeting, and because we had to either have the consultant committed to being here, or if it was going to be continued, released, and he might have spent several hours here, we decided the best direction would be to go ahead and reschedule the Pacific Park pool development discussion for November 25th. So we'd like to take this off this agenda. It'll reappear next Tuesday. And then with respect to the hearing 9A, which is the public hearing on the South Brand Boulevard specific plan and a number of other zoning changes and updates. The agenda indicated that public hearing would be continued without further public notice on November 25th. We would like to take that matter off calendar, and we'll come back to you and reschedule that for a study session for the City Council to work through as soon as we can.
Okay, and I thank you, Mr. Starbird.
So relative to the agenda update, it wouldn't show that the zoning ordinance coming back, and it would instead show the discussion of the Pacific Pool development concepts on the 25th.
All right, and we have another agenda-related issue that has to do with the Altura hearing, and but we'll come to that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and hear the agenda preview and appointments.
In addition to those two changes, next week on the 25th is the week that the presentations and appointments would be made, and there are a number of presentations that are listed. Under the action items, the city manager will be presenting a report for the city council to consider a resolution supporting the Convention on the Elimination on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Secondly, the city clerk will be providing a report with various resolutions supporting the April 7, 2009 general municipal election. And then lastly, the city attorney will be providing a report on the denial and findings regarding the Hillway property council previously considered.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McFall. Yes, Mr.
I would like to put the name of Arama Stepanyan on for Arts and Culture Commission. Mr. Stepanyan happens to be the artistic director of Luna Playhouse, which happens to be on 3706 San Fernando Road. And his education is from Thames Polytechnic University in London.
Okay, very good. We will hear more about that next week, correct, Mr. And Mr. Quintero, you have
Two nominations, one to the Audit Committee, Cynthia Vasquez, a graduate of the University of Texas with a degree, a Bachelor of Science. She's been an executive with State Farm for many years. She's on the board of directors of the Glendale Chamber of Commerce, is a chartered property and casualty underwriter, and has basically been in the city of Glendale for a number of years. I think she'll make a very good addition to the Audit Committee. And I'd like to reappoint or renominate Gary Cornell for the CDBG Committee. He's been on the committee. His time is up. He's attended all the meetings, does his homework, and does a very good job on CDBG.
okay, and Mr. City Clerk, I'd also like to place on the agenda for nomination Dick Bennett to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and he will be making all of those credits available for all of these resumes and so on, and I'll make a more extended presentation next week. Any other nominations to be placed in order while we're here?
That's all I got.
Okay, all righty. Thank you very much.
That finishes me off.
Okay, let's move on to the next item, please.
Mr. Mayor, the next item is would-be city council and staff comments.
Well, you know what, let's deal with the item at 9A while we're at a stop. Well, it's 9A on their letter. I think it's D, but they've indicated
The agenda
9.
shows it as 9A.
Yeah, the agenda, no,
90.
Oh, I'm sorry.
E on
I'm
the
sorry. You're right.
agenda.
I'm sorry.
In any case, they're referring to the correct parcel map, and it's dealing with 3525 Altura Avenue. And it is a request from the attorney for the applicant, Peter Wright, requesting that the hearing be continued. And as Mr. Wright, are you here? Would you mind coming forward and rather than me try to, I've just gotten your letter, so rather than me trying to present it for you, if you wouldn't mind.
He's on his way up. Perhaps the clerk can read that item into the record.
Let's do exactly that. Let's hear 9.
Under hearings, 9D is Director of Planning regarding appeal of tentative parcel map number GLN 1623 located at 3525 Altura Avenue. At D1 is motion denying tentative parcel map, and D2 is a motion continuing the matter and directing the city attorney to prepare written findings in support of approving tentative parcel map.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kasakia. Mr. Wright, could you state your name for the record and then...
Yes, Peter Wright, 100 West Broadway, Glendale. I'm representing the applicant, appellant in this matter, and I've set forth the reasons for the request in the letter, but I would be happy to recite them here if that's what you're
You just
requesting.
encapsulate that, or give us the issue in a nutshell so that my colleagues can hear it.
I did not represent the appellant before the Planning Commission following the decision there. I was retained and I reviewed the file and prepared the appeal response for my client. In the process, I reviewed the file to see what the neighborhood complaints were. There were a few neighbors who opposed it. There were some who favored it, and I didn't see that as a major issue. This afternoon, we were presented with a petition that apparently the city council members were aware of, but hadn't made its way to the planning file. A petition like this substantially affects the status and approach to the appeal. I cannot adequately represent my client tonight without having reviewed this petition, find out who the people are who are petitioning, what the concerns were that they have so that they can be addressed when we present our appeal. It would take a few weeks to gather the information that I think that I would need in order to proceed with the appeal. However, since that would push this matter into the middle of the holidays, and only my client is being hurt by the delay, I don't think it's hurting anyone else, we'd ask to have it just pushed over to the beginning of the year. I'm familiar with your agendas, and the beginning of the year agendas are also filled as well, so not necessarily the first meeting after the year, but possibly one after that. Anyway, we're respectfully requesting the matter be continued.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Don't go far, just in case there's a question. Let me turn it over to the city attorney and ask what the correct procedure would be to make this determination.
As Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you may want to seek responses from other members of the community who are here in the audience. They may or may not oppose it. You may want to check and see if there are speakers who want to speak on the issue of the request for continuance.
Of the continuance alone.
And the issue of the continuance rests within your sound discretion based upon essentially a good cause standard.
All right. Let me do that. Before I do that, let me ask if my colleagues have any input one way or the other before I go to the public. Mr. Najarian.
I was unaware of a petition. I don't know if you gentlemen received one.
I did not receive a petition either.
And I think that if Mr. Wright just became aware of it, I mean, previous to this, what I'm hearing is that he thought there was just a smattering of opposition to it. If there's a petition out there with a significant number of signatures, I think we owe it to the process to at least give him a chance to discuss the objections with the petition signers, and perhaps there can be some understanding made. There could be some confusion as to the style of house, the type of split on the lots. But then again, there might not be, but at least giving him the opportunity to do so, I think, is just in furtherance of the process of what we like to see, and that's the parties try to understand each other a little better before they come up to us. And I would like to understand the parties. If that is a petition filled with objections, I certainly would like to see who they are and how many there are, and perhaps their proximity to the lot in question.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Najarian. Anyone else before I go to the public?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Yusef.
In all due respect to my friend, this item was on the agenda several weeks ago. It was postponed because we had too many items on the city council. If you remember, I think it was the election night.
Yes, it was.
This was agendized for election night. And so I had that particular agenda, and I looked at it and prepared for it to vote on that item. Since it was postponed, I looked at the new agenda, and with the new, I do not have any petitions. I don't know what you're talking about. I have not received it. I don't think any of my colleagues have received it. Nevertheless, I'm ready to make a decision today based on a staff report which is pretty thick.
So your preference is?
My preference is to deal with it today. I haven't seen the petitions. I don't think it's going to affect me one way or another.
All right.
I make decisions based on the merits of the case.
Okay. Mr. Quintero, anything to add?
I also haven't received the petition. I'd be curious to see how many public.
That was the next question I was
Right.
going to ask, is how many people are here, by a show of hands, for the Altura, 3500 block of Altura issue? 2, 3, looks like 4 people. 4 people. So it's not a big crowd that's here to speak on. I should say how many of you are actually here to speak on the subject. All right, let me also ask if there are any of those who are here who would like to address simply the issue of the continuance. Yes or no, if you have a preference. Seeing one hand going up. Yes, ma'am. Why don't you come forward and...
Mr. Mayor, while she's coming forward, I should note that we do have a copy of a petition that, I don't know when it got into the planning file. We got a copy of it today. It appears to have approximately 20 signatures with addresses on them. Some of them are from the same household, but just from a quick count, it looks like at least 10 are from different households, along with an email to Councilmember Weaver that appears to have been copied to other council members opposing the subdivision.
Well,
So
emails
there's
aside, Mr. Howard, when you say we received it, you mean your
my
department?
office,
Your
our office received a copy. We asked, we heard about it and got it from the planning department.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, ma'am. If you could state your name and
Yes,
then-
I'm Carol Gibson. I live at 3504 Prospect Avenue. I'm directly behind the property in question. I feel that I would be the most affected by his proposed subdivision. We went to the Planning Commission a few months ago and were continued. We went back to another meeting where a unanimous decision was made to deny his request. We were set up to come here a few weeks ago. It was continued, and I don't want it to be continued again. I think that a decision needs to be made. There's been a lot of research done by your own Planning Commission, and I think the facts will bear out what the decision of your council should be this evening, regardless of a petition. I know those people, they're all my neighbors, and they don't want it. They don't want the subdivision.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on the issue of the continuance one way or the other? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Richard Barron. I am the owner of the property. I believe that a continuance is, I would like to see a continuance in that we can, in fact, address the matters that Peter Wright has mentioned. I believe that I would like to work with my neighbors. I'd like them to understand what the project is in detail, and that in general, and that in specifically is exactly where I would like to go, and in that sense, to have the continuance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Barron. All right, well, I have to say that I think we should have the hearing. I'm going to agree with at least 2 of my colleagues. We should have hear the public on this. It has been continued a number of times. I haven't seen the petition either, and the reason I guess makes sense now because we know that it wasn't received until today, or delivered until today. I do know that the sum and substance of the communications I've been getting pro and con, unsolicited from various members of the public, is I don't think I don't know how the petition itself changes those opinions or arguments. So my inclination is to go ahead this evening, and I want to thank both sides of the issue for speaking on that, and my colleagues for expressing a preference. All right, thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and take a vote if there's a motion to do that, to do so. Or I can just ask for consensus.
Can you ask for consensus?
Let's do that. I'll start on my right.
Let's do it today, get it over with.
All right.
Well, prefer in the interests of community harmony, we give the appellant a chance to identify those individuals opposing his project and give them a chance to understand each other. I would be in favor of a continuance.
Of a continuance.
I'd like to move forward with the hearing.
All right, and I would as well. So we have at least everyone on the record.
And I would suggest, if the matter is going forward tonight, that the petition not be considered and not be admitted into evidence, although I have to say, just from my review of it, there's signatures that relate to just the general notion of not wanting the subdivision. And so that should be, and that is, there are a couple of emails attached to that, which I'm assuming the council members received because they appear to be addressed to them, but the petition of 3 pages, along with a cover sheet, should not be admitted into evidence or considered by the council to move forward. In that way, I think procedural due process is certainly preserved and acknowledged. Again, the petition, in my view, doesn't add much, as the council members have said, and if it's not included in evidence, there's really no complaint that due process has been denied.
All right, very good. I thank you for that. Let us go back to item 4, which was City Council and staff comments. I do have a few comments to make, but before I get to that and my colleagues, let me go directly to Rich Wells, who is our Public Information Officer.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm pleased to announce that the city this Friday night is going to be launching the release of our very first photo book called Snapshot of Glendale, 24 Hours in the Life of Our City. We've talked about this, and it's finally come to fruition. We think it's the perfect time of the year, of course, to be selling it since the holidays are upon us. We're going to have a reception on Friday night at the Central Library. It's going to be an invitation, of course, to all of our photographers to come down and get their first look at the book, and, of course, anybody else who wants to come as well. We're inviting the public to come down and participate. The proceeds from the book are going to go for the special collections section at the Central Library, so we're excited about that. We think it'll be a good fundraiser for special collections. We think it's going to be a very successful book. We're very pleased with it. It's 92 pages. There's 76 photographers represented here. Some amateurs, some professionals. Some people picked up the camera a few weeks before the event. Some people have been shooting for over 40 years. So we have a wide variety of folks who participated in this, and of course you were involved in selection, and we think it's going to be a real nice book.
Well, thank you,
copies,
Rich. I might also add that the youngest photographer was 9, I think, and the oldest was well in his or her 80s.
Senior,
yes, 80 or better, let's say, and everyone in between. And it was very interesting to see the different professional disciplines, everyone from attorneys to attorneys. Mr. Najarian.
There are creative attorneys.
Everyone from attorneys to students to teachers to executives and everything in between. So it was very interesting. Thank you very much. And
we have your very own copy for you.
You may have a copy for us. Okay. Thank you very much.
All the public.
Mr. Wells, would you like to tell us, tell the public just a little bit about the cost of the book and where it might be available?
It retails for $50. We are still enlisting some local merchants who are going to assist in selling. The Friends of the Library are going to oversee the sales, and they are going to be selling it at the Book Nook at the Central Library, but we also will have some assistance from the Crescenta Valley Historical Society and some other community groups and organizations. Anybody who would like more information on it can call Chuck Wyke at the Central Library at 548-2042, and he can provide you with answers as to where the book is available.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Quintero.
Well, let me start by saying my only disappointment is that I was not allowed to compete for a place on the book, but we were afraid that if any of the city council members got a photograph in, that we'd be accused of pushing our artistic merits. But anyway, it's great, Rich. I really like it a lot. It turned out really well. I just want to thank the Parks and Recreation staff. I was at the Dunsmore Park ribbon cutting, and as usually did a great job of sort of redoing the clubhouse there at Dunsmore and some of the equipment for the kids, and it turned out very, very well. It's another jewel in Glendale's park system.
Well, thank you, Mr. Quintero.
We're autographing each other's books, so.
It's like the last day of school, I think. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Yusefian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you know, Mr. Mayor, you were unable to go to Dunsmore Park because you were out there helping a friend of yours evacuate from one of those horrific fires, and I had the pleasure of representing you and the city as Mayor Pro Tem. It is admirable the work that the staff has done to Dunsmore Park. We spent a little bit over $1 million, and there's some people here in the audience that had an opportunity to come and look at it. It was a job well done. I also had an opportunity to go to KAFLA, which is Korean American Association of Business. There were over 500 people there, and I also represented the city in that event. It was in downtown Los Angeles. It was heavily attended, and one of the honorees happened to be the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Mayor Villaraigosa, who received a certificate from the organization. I also had an opportunity this weekend to go to the Americana's tree lighting ceremony. I must tell you, it was nice to see so many people who came to the event, but I have some issue. I did come home around 10 o'clock after I went out and ate because I could not go there early enough for the little appetizers, so I went home after we went to dinner. And there were several phone calls on my machine, and there weren't people who were very happy due to the fact that there was fireworks involved. And on that day, all around Southern California, there were fires around us. And while I understand, I talked to our fire chief who was there, and there were firefighters on the roof, and we had taken all the precautions to make sure nothing goes wrong. I think it sent a very negative message on a day that everywhere you look, it's burning down, and you could see the soot and the smoke in the air. We put out the fireworks. The other thing that was surprising to me is, among many of us, I think most of us probably didn't even know there was going to be a fireworks until the fireworks actually went off. And we were kind of surprised, and my wife turned around and said, "Honey, did you know there was going to be fireworks?" And I kind of looked at her and I said, no. I had no clue about it. Apparently the day before there was something in the paper. Nevertheless, as I read the articles and some of the emails that went back and forth, this has been being planned for almost a month. So I would like to request, Mr. Mayor, from our city manager, from now on when we're going to have fireworks in Americana, or as a matter of fact anywhere else, that this council be told about it a little bit in advance, so we have an opportunity to tell the public that there is a fireworks coming up. So it serves two things. Number one, people don't get panicked because they haven't heard fireworks in Glendale for many, many years, and they automatically assume there is gunfire, especially when they're distances away, and then our phones ring. And also the people who wanted to go and enjoy the fireworks will get an opportunity to know about it so they could go and see the fireworks. But I would appreciate it if from now on, when something's going to take almost a month to plan, that we get a heads up on it, not to find out about it either in the paper or just be surprised by it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yusefian. Mr. Najarian, did you have?
I do have a comment, Mr. Mayor. And I'm sorry to report some bad news. Last night, Mr. Lanza Fame, Ken Hitz from Redevelopment, Annette Vartanyan, Elena Bolboyan, and I went to Beverly Hills for a Los Angeles Economic Development Commission gala, and we were robbed. We were robbed by the city of Santa Clarita. They got first place for the #1 business-friendly city in Los Angeles County. We were stunned. We had an acceptance speech ready to go. We thought for sure we were going to win it. We were in a tough group category with Pasadena, Santa Clarita, several other very dynamic cities, Long Beach also. So I was very upset, but this morning I called the chairman, Mr. Bill Allen, and expressed my disappointment, but he told us that if there was a second place prize, Glendale for sure would have won it. So I do want to congratulate everyone in the redevelopment agency and the city of Glendale for giving it a good shot. We were a finalist amongst all the cities in Los Angeles County for one of the most business-friendly in the area. So all I can say is maybe next year we'll bring home the trophy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you. I guess when you're Avis, you try harder. When you're second, you try harder. Okay. I also want to talk about the fireworks a bit. And I'll try not to cover the exact same ground that Councilmember Yusefian covered. I think there are a number of reasons why this was an ill-advised thing to do. First of all, let's look at Friday night. By the time we got to Friday night, the Montecito fire had already been ongoing. 10:30 rolled around, and people were hearing in excess of 100 residences burned. Friday night, around 10:30, I guess, is when the Sylmar fire began. The winds were howling, and especially if you live in a canyon area of the city or hillside area of the city, the winds were pretty strong. There's always the concern, obviously, this time of the year, about fires in our own city and those kooks who like to be opportunistic and take advantage of that and perhaps put our city in jeopardy. That was happening as of 10:30 on Friday night. Saturday night was followed by winds again, and Saturday evening, and which didn't really die down until Sunday, as you know, because Sunday is when all the smoke settled in because the winds were not blowing so strongly any longer. Most residents in the city were, like most residents in the county and the Southern California area, looking at the television, listening to the news, on the radio as well, and hearing about a weekend of fire in which, according to the LA Times today, nearly 1,000 residences, homes, it says, nearly 1,000 homes either destroyed or damaged in the fire, just between the Montecito fire, the Sylmar Burnett Hills fire, and the Brea Corona Yorba Linda Anaheim Hills fire. And we're having fireworks. Now, I understand that the city was looking after the issue of safety and whether it was safe to do this, and it may have been. I assume that our fire professionals know when it is safe to shoot fireworks in our downtown area. However, I'll just say it, Mr. Yusefian, I'm a little less generous than you. I think it was dumbheaded, and I don't know how else to candy coat it. Could I ask GTV6 to play the little clip? It's just a 59-second clip. They have it.
We're here at the Oak Ridge Mobile Park where the 606 units, 602 were occupied, 4 of them weren't, and we have over 500 homes that were destroyed here from the fire. During this incident, 8,000 acres had burned, And just up the street, about 4 miles from here, is where the fire started. At this point, the LAPD considers the crime scene only to investigate it. At this time, we do not have reason to believe that it was arson-related, and we do not expect to find any dead bodies within this facility at all. Once the coroner completes their search throughout each individual occupancy here, then they will allow the residents to come back. We'll continue to be here throughout the day, up until tomorrow, and up until as long as we need to keep this place safe, so that the cadaver dogs can get in, complete their search. LAPD can allow the residents back in this facility.
Thank you. This is also the image that was on the front page of the paper on Monday. Could we see that, please? I'm not the image that was on the front page of the paper, folks. There we go. Americana with the green and red fireworks going off. I got to tell you, folks, I don't think anybody planned for it to be this way. I know our fire department didn't. I know our management didn't. But I know my colleagues as well as me. When there's an error in judgment in this going forward, it's an error in judgment. This should not have happened. And Mr. City Manager, I want to ask, my colleagues will agree to this, to agendize a discussion about the process going forward for a policy for this. I think the public is of the impression, it's just an impression, that fireworks aren't allowed in the city of Glendale. I know that there are circumstances, obviously, where they are. But we need some kind of a policy examination or a process for that policy so that we're not heading down this road again. This is the second time we've had this. I like Mr. Caruso. I'm glad we have a nice development. I think everybody, regardless of their feelings about Americana, either before the referendum or after, want it to be the most successful lifestyle mall that we can have. We want the retailers there to be successful. We want everybody to have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and so on. But it makes you, after this weekend, want to say, to the folks at the mall there, put down the matches, step away from the fireworks. So let's have a policy discussion on that in general.
We'll do that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Mr. Najarian.
Along those lines, Mr. Mayor, I speaking for myself, and I think perhaps representative of all my colleagues, that we did not know that there were going to be fireworks. The first notice I got was the Saturday morning's full-page ad on the back page of the Glendale News Press. Among a long list of performers, it said fireworks. And I took it upon myself to, and at that time, the Sylmar fire had kicked in, but at least for myself, the full impact of the fires had not. I did send an email to City Manager Starbird, and I just want to read it. And it goes very simply: fireworks at Americana tonight. That's what the paper says. A good idea. Noise and fire concerns me. And then Mr. Starbird immediately responded to me, good point. I'm copying Chief Scoggins and Rick Caruso. It will depend on the weather conditions. As I understand, it is not large aerial displays, but more like the stadium style. But a good point I'm sure fire will be sensitive to. We were obviously thinking at different levels at that point. We were well aware of the community concerns when the Americana opened, the noise factor, where people said they were awakened. It was about 11 o'clock, maybe 12 o'clock. The other notion was the fire. Could these fireworks spread and cause a fire in Glendale? The trauma and the horror, at least for myself, of what had happened that night had not fully set in. I had not been watching TV throughout the night or yet during the day. This was an early morning conversation. Looking back, I think we should have done something. But in that policy decision, because this came up so quickly, obviously council could not have met, and I guess the question is, who makes that executive decision? Is that something that we entrust on you, Mr. Starbird, or is it something that, because the permit has been issued and there's no fire danger in the city, do psychological concerns or sensitivity issues play a role? And if they do, is that the mayor's call? Is that a conference call between three or more of us? We've got Brown Act issues to deal with.
And I think that is exactly, Mr. Najarian, why we need to have this discussion, to answer some of these questions.
And let's wrap all that in, because, and it won't necessarily apply to fireworks. It could be any other sort of city function that may turn out to be inappropriate at the last minute.
I agree personally, and I would just add to that. There's another specter here, you say, on different levels. It's not just the safety, and it's not just the psychological aspect of it. It's also this. We had assets out there. We had public safety assets out there at Americana at a time when the public is expecting that if we have assets to be standing somewhere other than in a fire station, it would be in our canyons and our hillside areas, not looking after a potential safety issue caused by the very fact that we are allowing fireworks to go on. So here we are with, and I don't care whether Mr. Caruso is reimbursing us for those costs. That's not the point in a weekend like we were having. So there's a number of issues to look at, and that's why I think we need to bring this up as a policy. If we have a policy, then we won't be readdressing it or reinventing the answer to the problem each time. So if I have some consensus from my colleagues to get into this later. Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll be sure and do that. Until now, we really haven't had a venue that's had such an interest in fireworks. So I think it's fair to say the staff's perspective has been from one of safety and coverage and to some extent public notification. But the extent to which the Americana has brought a different view in the use of fireworks than we've ever had before, it certainly, I think, points out a need to, from a policy standpoint, have a clear understanding of when and under what circumstances, and also the unique circumstances that arose this last weekend that certainly weren't envisioned back when the permit was filed, is something we can try to address in the policy. I can only give you my apologies for you all not being more aware and alerted to this. Frankly, I hadn't viewed it at the level that it ended up being. It was certainly more than it was described to me, but I guess in the whole scheme of fireworks, it was considered a relatively small display, although it certainly seemed large as I stood there at the Americana and watched it. But your points are all well taken. We'll place the matter on the agenda for development of a policy. I don't expect we'll have any further applications until you've had a chance to set policy for it.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. Are there any other staff comments? Okay. Council comments we've covered.
Let's hope we have discussions done prior to the New Year's. Because if there's any time for fireworks, it's more traditional in New Year, not Christmas. So I want to make sure we don't get caught by surprise. All of a sudden there's Happy New Year and there goes all the fireworks.
Mr. Mayor, let me say this. It's unlikely we'd have that policy back before you before the first of the year. It's unlikely we'll receive an application for fireworks for New Year's.
And if I can add, Mr. Mayor, members of council, even if we do, because it is a policy, our ordinance, as you properly characterized, Mr. Mayor, prohibits fireworks in Glendale. That's individual use of fireworks. The displays that you see at Americana are pursuant to special permits. We just don't have to issue it. And I think your direction is clear.
Will not until there's a council policy on the matter.
Thank you so much. If there are no other comments, let's move on to the next item.
Next item is consent item, including minutes following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. Any member of council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
Okay. Councilmember Youssef.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull 5C, and if there's no cards, move the rest.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. I have no other cards, or no cards. If there is no discussion, Mr. Kasakian, let's call the roll.
Council members Najarian.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver. Yusefian.
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes. Mr. Kasakian, could we hear the item at 5C, please?
5C is General Manager of Glendale Water and Power regarding service authorization for Glendale Water and Power Risk Management Services. C1 is motion approving a service authorization with RMI Consulting, Inc.
Okay. Mr. Yusuf?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm asking this, because I want a little bit more clarification on what this consultant is going to provide. The cost of services is about $5,000 per month, not to exceed $180,000 for 3 years. So I'd like to know, what is this individual going to provide that we cannot provide ourselves?
Mr. Steiger, who is our General Manager of Glendale Water and Power.
Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council, I'd like to address Mr. Safian's question. I'll give you a general overview of what we're requesting. For the last 6 or 7 months or so, we have been redirecting and reinforcing our energy trading and marketing unit at GWP. Currently, we transact roughly $85 million per year in energy transactions. We expect that to grow over the next couple of years, probably to $100 million or so. It's a large number. Most of our transactions are financially based in market-driven types of format with quite a bit of volatility built in. At the same time, we have traditionally, over the last few years, sold into the market excess energy when we have it available, and excess what we call ancillary services. We've made roughly anywhere from $500,000 to $2 million per year for GWP over and above our normal revenues. We know that we have the potential probably to ramp that up and bring in probably about another $10 million or so per year in additional revenues to GWP. What we've done in the last 6 months is, as I mentioned, redirected the unit to recognize the volatility and to be able to deal with all the issues that I've mentioned in terms of energy trading. And what we've done is we've brought in 2 groups. We've brought in ACES to do our real-time trading, and we've brought in the Energy Authority to do our natural gas hedging. The third leg of that is the energy risk management oversight, which is critical to this operation, particularly when you're dealing with energy volatility markets, as we do, and when you look at the volumes that we do, which are $85 million to $100 million currently. The energy risk manager, it's a critical position within any organization such as ours. Most utilities today have such a position or subcontract out the functionality. It is critical that we have the oversight and specifically to look at the credit worthiness of our counterparties, which is critical, to look at the limits of liability that we are creating when we start to do this kind of trading, and of course we do it now, to consistently oversee the trading activities, to make sure that our traders are trading within the confines of those parameters that we've established with our energy risk management policy. As I mentioned, it's a critical piece of what we're doing in energy and trading, and it's standard procedure pretty much in our business. We could have hired someone to do this that has the expertise. I've mentioned in the write-up that it would cost us at least minimally $150,000 per year to have a full-time person. We do not have that expertise in-house right now. It's a very specific type of expertise. Actually, I've been very conservative in my estimate on that $150,000. To bring someone in fully trained, fully expertise in this area would probably be quite a bit more than that. What we expect to be able to do, however, is over time, over the next couple of years, utilize the knowledge that we gain through RMI to train our own people, so ultimately we will bring that expertise in-house. We just don't have it now. It'll take a while to develop it, and this is a very, very good way to gain it.
follow-up question on that. Based on your information and your write-up, this is a very sensitive position. It's something that you need to have. So I need to ask this other question, which is, did you do an RFP for request for qualification, RFQ?
Yes, we did.
Are they, what's their expertise? Because I don't have anything. I have a 2-page item.
Correct.
One is the motion, and this is all I have, one face. So I don't know who this person is that we are hiring that is going to basically be the third leg on a chair to make sure that nothing falls apart, and if he makes a mistake, we may be looking at millions of dollars in liabilities, because that's what he does, risk management.
That is correct, and we did do, we asked for proposals, which we received, from 3 different sources. 2 of them were qualified, one was not. We've listed the dollar amounts in here of the 2. One was Virchow Kraus, which was over twice as much, but they were qualified. RMI is one of the...
Who went through, who else saw those RFQs? Was it just you, or?
No.
You had our city's audit committee, or the
risk management committee.
So they looked at it?
Yes, along with our financial, the GWP financial people, which is where this will reside.
And they feel comfortable with it?
Yes, very much so.
Thank you. I'll move the item.
Okay.
I'll second it. I
All right.
also
Do you have a comment, too, though?
Yeah, I have a question. How are we doing in our natural gas hedging? Price has been going down?
Yes. Interestingly, back in early summer, we were seeing prices of $12 to $13 in natural gas. About 2 weeks ago, we actually bought gas at less than $4. That's not the norm. Right now, we're seeing gas prices fluctuating in the $6 to $7 range, and we have now put in place a hedging program which will periodically buy small amounts of gas, or on a monthly basis, and that's our hedging program moving forward. What we have done, though, is we've taken advantage of this low point in the market, and we have purchased this winter's, most of this winter's supply and some of next summer's supply at these rates.
So obviously, if the rates stay at this price or just tick up a few dollars more, then that means GWP should be making a few bucks. Well, making a few bucks meaning we won't have to charge our customers more for their fuel surcharge.
If the gas rates stay where they are and the energy rates stay where they are right now, we expect to be able to drop our fuel adjustment in January. Yes.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion and a second for item 5C. Are there any other comments? There are not. Mr. Kasakian, let's call the roll.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item would be oral communications.
All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, we have oral communications on the agenda at the end of the agendized items, with the exception of those speakers who wish to voluntarily limit their time to 3 minutes for the purpose of making public announcements. I have a couple of cards. Let me go to those people now. The first speaker is Leon Mayer, followed by Rio Ray.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, members of the council, staff. My name is Leon Mayer, and I'm here on behalf of the library and the Friends of the Library. Where to go when you want to know it's the Glendale Library. First of all, I'm sorry to remind you that we've canceled the event for Ed Begley tomorrow night. We were going to have a substitute film that he was in called Who Killed the Electric Car, but we were unable to get by the copyright restrictions that were imposed, and so there'll be no event at the library for Ed Begley tomorrow night. There's a very good reason why we're not doing this, why he canceled. He is starting filming on a major movie, and he's going to New Mexico to start the filming with Jeremy Irons and Joan Allen. It's going to be a great movie, and hopefully we'll get some concessions from Ed in the future. Now, the next announcement I'd like to make is that we're having a book sale December 6th at the library at the loading dock. And you'll be able to buy almost used books, almost new books for $1, paperback 50 cents, and that will go on between 9 and 1, and it's a good, proceeds go to the Children's Summer Reading Program, and it'll be a good place to get Christmas gifts, holiday gifts, great books. So that's my second announcement. And my third announcement is to remind everybody that we have a great brand library and arts center at the end or beginning of Mountain Street. The supervisor is Elisa Resnick, and she's brought great artists and great painters and paintings to that library for many years. And on December 10th at the Brand Library Recital Hall, we will have a documentary film with narration by Diane Keaton, who's a class act, as we all know. And the title of the documentary is Maynard Dixon, Art and Spirit, and that will be at December 10th, 7 o'clock at the Brand Library Recital Hall. And for those of you who haven't heard of Maynard Dixon, he was a great person, strange and famous life, and great artist, and that'll be a great documentary. All these things we do at the library are free to the public, and we welcome everybody to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, our next speaker is Rio Ray, followed by Rosie Akopian.
Well, most of you know that I'm new to Glendale. I replaced Jim Sloan here just about 4 months ago. The Salvation Army in Glendale helps out many people. Youth through the Zone program and the Safe Place, the homeless through the Nancy Painter House, seniors through Meals on Wheels. To do all of that, it takes money. And one of your council members has agreed to take this kettle and fill it up for us. And I would just like to present this to Ara Najarian.
Thank you.
You going to fill it?
Don't misunderstand, Mr. Najarian. They're applauding for the fact they want to see you fill it up. Oh, I think it's weird the one's filling up. Okay.
Yes.
All right. While the kettle is being passed around, Ms. Ray, could you state your name for the record?
Oh, my name is Rio Ray.
Very good.
R-I-O-R-A-Y.
Very good.
And there's more to it, Mr. Mayor. Those wily rascals at the school board, whom I am so fond of, as everyone knows, have challenged us. Can you believe it? They challenged us again to see who can raise more money. And I took the challenge, and we are going to find out Friday. So this is only going to be available for a few... This is back. Only available for a few days, and then this obviously will kick off the collection campaign that we're all familiar with, the bell ringers, et cetera, in front of the retail establishments.
Absolutely.
Well, I would also like to add, Mr. Najarian, that according to the note on the side of the kettle, each of us provided at least one hot meal on Thanksgiving Day based on the dollar amounts, and that's a good thing to know about, so appreciate that. And I'll hold it while you put some money in,
Did the
Mr.
city
Najarian.
attorney make any payment?
Not yet, but there you go.
Yes.
Very good.
This counter to the aggressive solicitation ordinance that we're going to be dealing with.
There we
There's
go.
no ordinance yet.
Not effective yet.
All right.
So long as it's done on the dais, it's okay.
Wow.
It's just like church.
All right. thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Welcome aboard. We miss the Sloans. We're going to be very, very happy to establish a new relationship with you, Mr. Ray, and thank you so much for coming down. I hope it won't be your last visit. And we'll see what we can do about competing with our colleagues across the hall at the school district to see if we can't compete with them for contributions.
Well, Sheldon Baker said he was sure you guys would win, so.
Wow.
We'll make sure we take this to Sheldon's place.
All right. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Rosie Hakopian.
Yeah, we should put it right next to the
Right
wall.
there.
Whoever comes to oral communication throws it.
I listen a little better with a little jingle in the pot.
Oh, I don't know. If you say that, then it'll solve a conflict of interest.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond,
Good evening.
Councilman and staff. My name is Rosie Akopian. I'm here today as the Parent Committee Chair of our Glendale ORWP Titans Water Polo Club. We were here last month to announce the fact that these wonderful young men behind me succeeded in their state competitions and made it to the Speedo Cup, which was being held in Ann Arbor, Michigan this year. And we are here to tell you the results of the competition. First and foremost, we're really proud of their accomplishment because this was the first time that they've achieved this level of success to make it there. They were competing nationwide against, water polo teams from every state. And they made 7th place, which we're very proud of because we think that's a big thing compared to 50 states. So we wanted to announce that. And with me is our one of our coaches, Marine Arakelian. And if we have 2 minutes, I want the kids to just tell you their name and the school they go to.
That would be terrific. Let's do that.
My name is Eric Sipon. I go to St. Robert Bellarmine.
My name is Haik Saruki, and I go to Woodrow Wilson Middle School.
My name is Arman Momjan, and I go to Rosemont Middle School.
My name is Asatur Galfayan, and I go to Thomas Starr King Middle School.
My name is Martin Chital, and I go to Roosevelt Middle School.
My name is David Papazian, and I go to St. Robert Bellarmine School. My name is Varthan Mamikon, and I go to Robert A. Middle.
Thank you very much. That's let's give those team members a round of applause. Rosie, we have our council members up here have a little something for the guys. If you wouldn't mind helping them out, gentlemen, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to do something extraordinary. Generally, we give them pins, and I know that's great, but these guys generally have to carb up before they go play. So I'm going to give Rosie $100. You take him down to a pizza place and carb him up for tonight afterwards.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Yusefian, I need to carb up too. And all right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Enjoy
guys.
tonight.
Very, very good. All right.
Oh, they got it.
I'm starting a water polo team, by the way.
Mr. Kasakian, can you lead us to the next item, please?
It is extreme.
Are we all done for the
We are.
announcements? Next item under action items, Mr. Mayor, at 8A is Director of Libraries regarding the appropriation of funds to the library and the city's general fund to reflect fees and fines updates. At 8A1 is a resolution appropriating $8,000, and 8A2 is a resolution approving the updated fees and fines schedule.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kasakian.
Cards?
Okay, yes, we do. Let's go to Cindy Cleary, our Director of Libraries.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'm here tonight to ask for your approval to amend some of the fines and fees that the library charges, primarily related to overdue items or items that go to the collection agency. Just a couple highlights. One thing we want to do is raise our overdue fine from 20 cents a day to 25 cents a day, and we anticipate that will raise an additional $25,000 for the general fund. We also would like to raise our return check fee from $20 to $25, our lost book processing fee from $8 to $12. I won't go into every single fine and fee, but those are some of the examples of the things we'd like to do.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me go to speakers from the public, and then I'll come back to see if there are any comments. Our first speaker is Nancy Kent. 3 minutes.
Nancy Kent, resident of Southeast Glendale. I approve of the concept of raising the fines because it is so easy to renew materials at the library. Either you can do it by phone, and it's very easy on the internet. The one issue I would take exception to is raising the fees for renting a meeting room there. I have not used the Central Library very often for that, but when I do, I appreciate that there was just an $8 fee for renting a small conference room for a 3-hour period. And I see that they're proposing to do away with all the different categories, but I would ask you to please continue to have a category for local Glendale nonprofits that has a reduced rate. So perhaps instead of $10 an hour, it would be $5 an hour for Glendale nonprofits. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kent. Our next speaker is Barry Allen with Van Guardians.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council staff. I'm Barry Allen with Van Guardians. Two items on there. One, I was looking for the schedule attached. It wasn't attached relative to the meeting rooms, and I need to see what that is. And I need to also echo what Ms. Kent said, that in the past there were rates for Glendale-based nonprofits. I think that needs to be continued. I would also like to make the comment on the cost of the check return, that the charges should be exactly what the bank charges the city for the return of a check. Otherwise, it becomes a profit center and a tax on the public. So I think that those costs should be exactly what they are to the city. Thank you. Barry Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Mr. Quintero.
I agree with the speaker on the issue of the small rooms for non-profits. I would like to either see it at $5 an hour, but I have a question from the director.
Ms. Cleary?
Is there one standard rate for small rooms throughout the library system, or, specifically if you rent something at the Central Library, is it the same as some other brand? Or?
This only applies to the Central Library's small conference rooms. We actually are in the process of reviewing all our fees for meeting rooms and our auditorium at Central Library. Meeting rooms meaning the other facilities.
Right.
And that's not included on here.
Okay, well, I've attended conferences or meetings at the small rooms at the Central Library, and it seems to me either $8 or the $5 an hour. I mean, I think it should be something very reasonable.
I will add that the rooms are free for students and for literacy programming.
Other comments? Councilmember Yusefian.
Before she sits down, our staff report doesn't say anything about the meeting rooms. All it says in here, there's one line that says fee, meeting rooms, and then underneath says see meeting room schedule. No schedule. I'm looking at the resolution. There is no money in there, so I don't know if you're asking for any increases. Where is it?
The meeting room schedule refers to our meeting rooms at the other sites. That's not referring to the conference room, and that's not included in here because it's not part of the proposal.
Okay, so what Ms. Kent was talking about is under where?
Yeah, let me find it.
While we're looking, Mr. Starberg, you had your hand up.
No. I mean, I did, but
Okay.
Well, I may be mistaken. It
I
may
didn't- I
be part
couldn't
of
find
that.
it either.
Yeah. No, my apologies.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. It's in the text of the report, but it's not on the schedule, so
It's in the report, but it's not in the schedule,
Yeah.
so we have,
my error.
you know, the report is not what the resolution is all about.
Yeah.
That's just a staff report.
I mean, what I could propose, because we are reviewing our auditorium,
Don't you bring all
not
of them
include
together?
that and bring that at a later date.
That would be good.
So this action that would not include the rental rates, which will come back to you as a separate report.
Which may be
All of them.
which may be academic anyway, because I don't know what the rest of my colleagues, how they feel about that item, but I too would like to have some conversation about the rental rates for nonprofits. I would also like to see an alternate rate. So if there is, say, one more council member that felt that way, we'd be taking that item out anyway, probably anyhow, so.
And that follows the model of our auditorium, because we do have a nonprofit and a for-profit. It was just, we were trying to simplify the conference rooms.
Well, I'd like to take it out of this.
Okay. And Mr. Yusefian, did you have anything else other than that particular?
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Najjar?
I have no comments.
Okay. Very good then. Thank you. And, I do have one. There was one other question that was raised by Mr. Allen, and that was the rates on return checks, the rationale.
I thought that was the same rate that the city charges within other organizations with other departments. And my memory is that was why we made that decision to raise it from 20 to 25.
Okay, but I think the question more related to whether or not we are charging a rate that is higher than the actual bank charge.
Well, experience I have is, not that I have returned checks, but I thought that banks actually were at a higher rate.
And we can find out for you. So you can pull that item out if you wish, or...
It really depends. Even if we do charge a higher rate, there still is staff time involved, and so the fee is justified. It's essentially our cost of processing it. Because when a bank returns it to us, we have to do something with it.
Right. No, the question was not whether or not we, it wasn't agreeing or disagreeing. I just want to know, and I think the speaker wanted to know what the rationale was.
I'm comfortable with the $25. The moral story is don't write bad checks.
All right. Mr. Quintero, anything to add about bad checks?
25.
Okay. Mr. Najarian?
Okay with it.
All righty.
Mr. Mayor, I would
Yes,
like
sir.
to move the item excluding the meeting room in the main library or the conference
The
room.
rates.
Rates.
And we have,
The proposed new rates.
Right.
right.
But
Okay.
everything else, move everything else.
Okay. And Mr. Quintero seconded that. Is there any other discussion? There is not. Mr. Kasakian, if you would, please.
Council members Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver, Yusefian, Mayor Draymond.
Yes. Okay. Our next item, please.
At 8B is Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services regarding proposed Pacific Pool development work at Pacific Park. At B1 is a motion selecting and approving a Pacific Park Pool preliminary concept as project master plan, and directing staff to return with a contract amendment to extend RJM Design Group's scope of work to include design development, construction documents, bidding, and construction administration phases of work.
Okay. And we had addressed this earlier, and that this item will be, we are actually moving this item. We're
Actually
continuing-
held over to 11:25.
Yeah, till the 25th, which is next...
Which is next
week.
Tuesday.
Next
That's
Tuesday.
right.
You need a motion for that?
All right, let's move on to the next item, please.
8C is City Attorney regarding ordinance relating to limitations on the solicitation of funds, property, or services by council members, city clerk, and city treasurer from persons or entities with city redevelopment agency, GRA, or housing authority contracts or applications pending before the council, GRA, and housing authority, reporting requirements and prohibition on using official title when signing a solicitation letter on behalf of an organization on which the elected official is a board member.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Yusefian.
Move the ordinance. Introduce the ordinance. Sorry.
All right. Yes, Mr. City Attorney.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, far be it to me to give a report and essentially snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, so to speak. But I think it's important we consider, in light of the whole kettle circumstance which just occurred, we consider making something very clear. Actually, I did have a conversation about the proposed Salvation Army kettle donation challenge, if you will, and because the question even had to be asked yesterday, it indicated to me that we need to have some clarity, and there probably will be other questions asked involving some of the provisions of this ordinance because of just the very nature of what it is. And as a result, I'm proposing that you think about adding some language to the definition of solicitation. Right now, one of the exclusions is campaign contributions, which are covered by another ordinance. I would suggest, given what the intent and the purpose clause of this ordinance outlines, that you consider adding some additional language that would state that solicitor solicitation herein does not include either a request for campaign contributions or a broad general statement or request made by a council member, city clerk, or city treasurer at a duly noticed meeting of the city council seeking financial or other support for a non-profit organization, so long as the council member, city clerk, or city treasurer does not have an interest in the organization as set forth in section 2.83.104D. That is the subsection that prohibits using your official title in the solicitation for a charity or a for-profit entity where you have a 10% or greater interest as a shareholder, or you're the CEO or CAO or COO. That would cover the...
You just think that up on the fly?
No, actually, I wish I could say that, but it occurred after the conversation I had last night about this, the whole issue involving this potential, which occurred tonight with the presentation of the kettle and the challenge, of ensuring that the council has the flexibility to be able to assist a local non-profit, community-based non-profit in situations just like this, without potentially either running afoul of the ordinance or requiring an interpretation that others may disagree with.
All right. Yes, Mr. Youssef.
May I put a fly in his ointment?
Absolutely.
While it sounds on the surface that it's kind of benign and it's okay, I think what we did today with the kettle does not fall under this ordinance in the first place because it has not been adopted. But I have an issue with introducing that type of item to this ordinance. It could be used later on by some individual council members in a wrong way. Just imagine every week one council member comes in and says, I am here asking people to give money to another organization, and so on and so on. And every week that person comes out and says that. So I think we're going a little bit too far. That's not part of our job to be doing this. I mean, this would be almost, one person trying to grandstand and says, every single organization will come and says, hey, Bob, could you please go out there and ask for, contribution for my organization? And if you decide not to do it, you're a bad guy. So they play one against another. That's why I don't want to get into it.
So how would you change that then?
I would leave the ordinance as is, because I think that pretty much deals with this. So let's say if you want to raise money for a certain organization, I think you're still able to do that. You just can't use your name as title. You could say, Aaron Najarian is asking for your contribution.
So let's say that this ordinance was passed as is. Would you want someone to do what we just did, or what I did, saying, here's the Salvation Army, come on, Mr. Starbird.
The Salvation Army can come up.
Margaret, or whoever.
The Salvation Army could have come in here, stood up there and said, this is what we're doing, and we could have said, that's okay, and that will be fine. Instead of Salvation Army guy come in here and say, you know what, Bob told me to come in here and challenge all of you guys, and that's when we run afoul into that. The deed would have still been done if this ordinance had passed, so long as it did not mention any council member's name. It would be fine.
Actually, the areas that would potentially and arguably run afoul of this ordinance are two. One, I've kind of developed somewhat of a six-step analysis to determine, is this a solicitation? Well, the answer would be yes, it would be a solicitation. Is it to someone who has a contract with the city? Well, arguably, no, but if it's a general appeal to anyone in the universe, I guess someone could consider that to be a solicitation to someone that does have a contract with the city as well as someone who doesn't. The intent of the ordinance was really not to address general broad appeals. It was to address council members who might select a particular contractor, zero in on that contractor, and seek a solicitation for some favorite charity or some other organization. The concern I had, and it was kind of exemplified here, at least under the ordinance, is the prohibition against solicitation of city officers, employees, or departments. And so someone could argue that presenting the kettle to myself or Mr. Starbird might have been a violation of the ordinance. Now, but again, that speaks to an officer or a department. And if it was just a broad general appeal, there'd be an argument that that broad general appeal might sweep within its grasp officers or employees because it's an appeal to anyone within the universe that's in listening or hearing distance. But if you go directly to myself as an individual, it might arguably be in violation of the ordinance.
All right. Let me, Mr. Quintero, do you have anything to add? Do you have a preference one way or the other on this?
I don't think we need it.
You don't think we need it? All right. Let's hear from our speaker. We have a speaker, and we'll come back to the council. We have one speaker card from Barry Allen.
Oh, and I'm glad, as Mr. Allen's coming up, I did receive a call from a concerned citizen who expressed the point that the council should consider potentially extending this type of ordinance to organizations like the fire department, which engages in solicitation for fundraising activities.
Let's come back to that. Let's hear from Mr. Allen. I have a question about that. Mr. Allen, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council staff. I'm Barry Allen with Van Guardians. Two issues. One, of course, as Mr. Howard just commented on, and that is this proposed ordinance speaks to the council because that's all you were looking at when the original issue came about because of Mr. Weaver's aggressive solicitation methods. However, you do have the fire department that has no policy when it comes to raising money. They use city equipment, city personnel, all on duty, block streets, and collect money for whatever charity they've chosen under whatever non-existent policy there is. And shortly we can have the GWP going out and using city equipment and soliciting for whatever charity they want, or the city manager's office, or the Steve Zern's people, or the police department. I think this policy needs to be extended to all of the city departments because you need a policy as to the money counting issues, how the charities are selected, whether you're going to use on-duty or off-duty people, whether you're going to use city equipment, regarding the liabilities. There are a lot of issues there. And on another thing, and I don't know really if this is the appropriate place, but I received a number of phone calls in the last few days from developers, contractors, architects who have been put upon by the missing city council member to help him either remove or change the duties of the zoning administrator. And they felt very, very badly about a city council member interfering in that type of in the city manager's business. And once upon a time we did talk about that as to whether or not the council members would have direct connection with city department heads. And it's in the same area. It may not be solicitation of funds, but it's solicitation of people to do the bidding of the council member. As I say, I don't know if it's just the appropriate point in the ordinance process, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen.
Okay, Mr. Allen. Question for the city attorney. When the Glendale Firefighters Association goes out on Labor Day weekend and is passing the boot for Muscular Dystrophy Association, is that where is the line drawn? Is it the Glendale Firefighters Association, or is it the Glendale Fire Department that is doing that?
I honestly don't know. I can only assume, and I don't want to do that. Mr. Starbird might know for certain, and I don't know if representative of the fire department is here who can answer that. I'm not certain if it's the association or individual members of the department.
And Mr. Mayor, based on my years in local government where that's a common practice among fire departments and, frankly, police departments have their favored charities, it's a mixture of the two. It's volunteers as well as on-staff people. It's just as a tradition that has been in the fire service for decades and decades. The burn center, for example, the relay for the burn center, that's both police officers and firefighters, they're on city-owned equipment. Ours and almost every other fire agency and police agency in Southern California participates in that. It's just part of the tradition in those departments.
Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, I do agree with that to a point that it is traditional to do something of this sort, but I think it is important for this council to give some sort of approval. These are fire apparatuses. These are equipment that cost sometimes $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, sometimes $800,000 a piece to go around. They are charging us over hundreds of dollars per hour to protect the community at large. I do not want to have police, fire, or as a matter of fact, Mr. Zern's trash collecting equipment to be used to collect cans for the homeless. If we decide collectively as a collective body to do that, Mr. Zern can come to us and say, you know what, the pantries are short. We think it would be a good idea as they pick up the trash, our people can pick up, let's say, some canned goods for Salvation Army. What do you think, council members? And I'm pretty sure we're all reasonable people, and we probably say, you know what, that's fine, and we'll announce it to the public to go out there in the street and put those things in the bags, make it easier for them to pick up. But I think we need to have some kind of control over that because we're the ones who get the calls. So Starbird doesn't get the calls. We're the ones who get the calls saying, why did they block the street? They were passing a booth around, and how much am I paying? Is it being volunteered? If it's not, they're out there making pancakes. Are they doing this voluntarily, or are we paying them on overtime? And my answer to them is, I don't know. I really don't. And so I don't want to be in that position. I don't know about the rest of you, but, you know, if they want to do this voluntarily, God bless them, I have no problem with that. But unless somebody can tell me unequivocally this is volunteer and it doesn't cost the taxpayers money, you know, it would be cheaper sometimes for me to just hand out that $10,000 instead of spending $40,000 worth of equipment and resources to collect that $10,000. So I don't know. That's why I'm saying I don't want to forbid them, but I think there needs to be some kind of a approval process through us.
Okay. Mr. City Manager, you have your
Mr.
hand.
Mayor, can I suggest we'll bring that whole topic back to you, but I wouldn't try to fold that into this discussion. They're really two different issues.
Well, it really is a different, in my view anyway, it is whether it is a valid concern or someplace we should go, we can debate and come to an answer on, but I don't know how we would add that at this moment anyway.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a separate issue.
Not legally germane, wouldn't be able to do
Mr.
it.
Quintero.
Well, obviously, it doesn't pertain to what we're doing tonight, which is to focus on elected officials and their interaction with the public. But in terms of the employees, I haven't had one complaint, I haven't heard one issue from anyone in terms of the charity work that our employees do, whether it's police, fire, or anyone else. So I'm not particularly, or public works for that matter, I'm not particularly interested in getting into cataloging what they do, and we're going to pick and choose and approve or not approve whatever charities they're working with. I'm totally comfortable with the fundraising activities, the burn center, and all of the other activities that they get involved with. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a non-issue.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to clarify that first of all, maybe I'm just unaware, but I have never had a situation where I've seen a street blocked or a fundraising activity by the fire department where they're passing the boot and close the street. I've never heard of such a thing. But on top of that, just so the public understands, this is not a discussion about whether the fire department, the Glendale Police Officers Association, or any other nonprofit or city employee is out there raising money with the idea that it's going to be given to a council member. That isn't what's going on. They're talking about fundraising activities for specific charitable nonprofits. So in any case, we can discuss all of that and get into it in more detail, but is there any other debate on this particular item as it appears on the agenda? Mr. Najarian.
I just want to clarify what Mr. Yusefian's comments, where he basically requested that you carve out your language that you discussed about the broad solicitation for a group, essentially that you're not on the board of directors or whatever. If we do not add that, let me just give another example. The Downtown Dash was a 5K run, charity. The funds went to, I forget which, I think it was Adventist Hospital Stroke Center. And we, I think, discussed it several times on council. Get out there, run. It's $10, $20, whatever, to enter. Would that be a violation if we, assuming the ordinance passes, without your further clarification language that you had discussed?
Not if the city council either collectively agreed that this was something that should be done and approved it, or sponsored it or co-sponsored it consistent with other policies and ordinances that we have in place.
Okay, so if it was approved or affirmed by the council, or already
or the council or the city,
existing policy.
An existing policy, meaning sponsorship, co-sponsorship, or endorsing.
Okay, but if not, let's say it wasn't.
If it wasn't, it could potentially
I
be.
go out there on a limb and I say, whatever. I mean, face it, we get a lot of requests from different charities, very, in good faith and very valid.
In all likelihood, broad general appeals would probably not be a violation. I have to say probably because I would need to assess the specific facts of a situation. But if you go through somewhat of this six-step analysis, is it a solicitation? Is it a solicitation to someone with a contract? Is it a solicitation to someone with an application pending? Is it a solicitation to an officer, employee, or a city department? Or are you a shareholder or CEO of the entity for which you're trying to seek solicitation? If you go through that analysis and you answer those questions, and all of them are answered in the negative. Now, obviously, if you answer the first one in the negative, then that's the end of the inquiry. But as you move through it, you can assess it based upon the facts of a given situation. When I began to think about this entire issue involving the Salvation Army kettle, my assessment was in the final analysis under the ordinance that just a broad general appeal, if the kettle would have, if Mr. Ray would have come up with the kettle, said we've got a challenge, Councilmember Najarian's accepting the challenge, and you stood up and made a broad general appeal for funds to fill the kettle, I don't think that's a violation of the ordinance as drafted. The only area that becomes questionable is a presentation of the kettle to a specific employee, and then the question is that a specific solicitation of an employee which would run afoul of the ordinance. But the broad general appeal, in my opinion, based upon the ordinance and its purpose clause, would not be a violation.
Give us your checklist. You were talking about you have a 6-point checklist.
I just wrote it out. I can type it up and send it to you if you like.
Give it to us
Sure.
during the week. So
it's somewhat similar. It's somewhat similar to the type of analysis you do under the Political Reform Act, which is essentially a 7-step analysis. But I've
Before we get to a 12-step here, let's Mr. Quintero.
I have a quick question. Section D of 83.104 talk about a writing and so forth. That also includes a verbal solicitation. Is that correct?
Actually, the definition of writing is on page 5 of on page 5, which is not an oral solicitation. Writing is actually any document, letter, including an email. So it actually has to be something where you would actually either sign your name or have it.
But it doesn't cover, the ordinance wouldn't cover an oral solicitation?
The ordinance does, but not subsection D. Subsection D is using your official title to solicit funds for a it says nonprofit or for-profit, and I included for-profit because I wanted to try to capture, I didn't want to create a loophole, wanted to capture just about everything we could. It precludes you from seeking funds for an organization where you actually have and using your official title, where you sit on the board, or you're CEO or CAO or COO, or have 10% or more of the shares.
Right, or if I sit on the board of a nonprofit, I am prohibited orally from soliciting funds for that
No.
nonprofit.
No, not orally. You're prohibited from using your official title in any writing, soliciting funds.
So Frank Quintero can go out and ask for money, but can't say Frank Quintero, the council member.
Correct.
So I can sit on the board of a nonprofit, a specific nonprofit. I can sit on that board and I can orally solicit funds. Well, I can't solicit funds from someone that has development fund and all of the other, right?
Right, that's
But
correct.
in general, I can go out and solicit funds.
They have a First Amendment right to do that, as well as...
There's no way we can prohibit that type of behavior.
In my opinion, you can only restrict it so far, and I think you've gotten there with...
As far as we can go.
You've got contractors, you're limiting it to contractors, you're limiting it to those that have applications pending, and we've included not only the city and the redevelopment agency, but also the housing authority, and officers, employees, and city departments. So it really is restricted down to those areas where there's the potential for pay to play and the quid pro quo.
All right.
As well as the undue pressure on city employees.
All right, is there any other discussion? No, okay. Do we have a motion and a second?
It has been introduced.
It has been introduced, okay, pardon me.
We'll
Yes.
vote on it next week.
We'll vote next week, folks. All right. Let's move on to item D.
8D is City Attorney regarding follow-up items to extensions of discretionary land use entitlements and building plan checks and deferral of inclusionary housing in lieu fees. 1 is an ordinance for introduction, discretionary entitlements. 2 is an ordinance for introduction for plan reviews. And 3 is an ordinance for introduction for affordable housing in lieu fees.
Okay, very good. I see that, well, Mr. Yusefian has his hand up, so I'm going to Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to introduce 8D 1, 2, and 3.
All right.
I think we talked about this last time.
We did, and I just wanted to add
Okay,
one.
Let me go to Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just one comment I wanted to make on the ordinance with respect to discretionary land use entitlements. The ordinance is, per your direction, were to extend those for a year, and that's what the ordinance will do. One thing that I pointed out in the written report, and I'll point out to you now, is that there's a possibility that those discretionary entitlements could still expire before a plan check that you're going to be extending till the end of the year, at the end of next year. So you could have this sort of mix match, and there was some discussion last week, and I just wanted to point it out to you and say that you could introduce the discretionary entitlement ordinance to say the entitlements are extended for either a year or until December 31, 2009. That way there's no possibility that the entitlement will expire and you still have this open plan check. So if you want to introduce the ordinance with that revision, we'll bring that back.
That's what I was thinking in the first place.
Okay.
So all the dates are the same.
On the plan check and the entitlements, yes.
All right.
It's a year or December 31st, whichever is later.
Right.
December 31st.
2000.
That's correct.
2009.
2009.
Thank you. I don't have any cards on that topic. Any comment? There's no comment. The ordinance has been introduced. Okay. And next week we will vote. All right. Next item, please.
9A is hearings, Director of Planning regarding proposed ordinance amending Title 1, 2, and 30 of the Glendale Municipal Code and the South Grand Boulevard Specific Plan relating generally to the codification of zoning code interpretations, miscellaneous revisions, and minor cleanups, PZON 2008-005, and a resolution establishing new fees associated with time extension requests. At A1 is a motion continuing the public hearing to November 25th, 2008, without further public notice.
Move the item.
Okay, well, let's just stop for a moment. This item is the item we were speaking about earlier in the evening. Second.
Mr. Mayor, we'd ask to be taken off calendar for the purpose of scheduling a study session.
Which will be soon, I hope.
Right.
Yes, it'll be soon.
Yeah. Okay.
That was my motion.
Okay. Very good. All right. Next item, please.
9B is Director of Planning regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources listing and Mills Act contract for the property at 1428 Imperial Drive. B1 is a resolution approving the property as a historic resource and authorizing the Mills Act contract.
Do we have any cards?
We have no cards.
Moved item.
Well, let's want to open the public hearing.
Actually, it is a public hearing, isn't it? Yes. Okay, let's open the public hearing at 9B and 9B1. I have no speaker cards on this topic. Yes, Mr. Kasakian, do you have anything? No? All right. Mr.
Let
Quintero.
me just say these are two beautiful homes, one of which I drive by quite often. It's near my neighborhood, and just shows you the incredible historic homes that we have in Glendale that are absolutely worth preserving, and the property owners are stepping up to the plate.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Yusefian?
Was that a second? Because I already moved the item.
Yeah, that's a second.
Comment?
Okay. We have no comments, so we'll close the public hearing. All right. Mr. Kasakian.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian?
Yes.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. We hear the item at 9C, please.
And 9C is Director of Planning regarding Glendale Register of Historic Resources listing and Mills Act contract for the property at 721 East Mountain Street. At C1 is a resolution approving the property as a historic resource and authorizing the Mills Act contract.
Thank you very much.
Move 9C. Open the public.
Give me 1 second. You guys are so quick. We need to open the public hearing at 9C 1. All right. Now, Mr. Quintero.
I'll move 9C.
Right. And second. We have a motion and a second. Mr.
A
Yusefian.
comment. I remember this house being in a real bad shape in the 1980s. Lived in Glendale since 77. So I don't know if the same owner who bought it and put the amount of money, but I think somebody bought it and put a lot of money into it. And I guess this is the next owner who has purchased this property and spent a lot of money on this. It is a beautiful house, nice castle style, you know. Also, I would like to take the opportunity at this time to thank the staff for providing us with full color photos compared to before getting just black and whites. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Najarian, do you have any?
And how would staff officially describe the architecture?
The castle house?
I mean, is castle style?
Mr. Platt, you need to.
Is that a recognized?
You need to come to the.
No, it's not a recognized style. In the style terms that we have in our residential guidelines, it's French-inspired because it's like a Norman keep, part of a Norman castle. So we're going with French-inspired.
All right. All right. I have no cards on this item. Is there any other discussion? All right. Let's call the roll.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes. All right. The next item, please.
9D is a hearing, Director of Planning regarding appeal of tentative parcel map number GLN 1623 located at 3525 Altura Avenue. D1 is a motion denying tentative parcel map, and D2 is a motion continuing the matter and directing city attorney to prepare written findings in support of approving the tentative parcel map.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Kasakian. Let's open let's open the hearing at 9D, 1 and 2. And Mr. Agani, are we going to you initially? It's on roll. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Vilius Zomaititis, the case planner, has prepared a very brief presentation to highlight aspects of the staff report.
One more time. The case before you this evening is an appeal of a tentative parcel map at 3525 Altura Avenue. The subdividers, the property owners, and the applicant are all the same individuals who would be Richard Barron and Lai Peng Lau.
You see before you, the subject site is highlighted in yellow. It's a rectangular-shaped project site, 100 feet wide by approximately 236 feet deep. Has an approximate square footage of 23,000 square feet, and it's roughly a little over half an acre. It's currently developed with 2 detached single-family residences on the lot. It gently slopes upward with an average current slope of 8.3%. Access to the residence is taken off of Altura Avenue, and the average lot size within a 500-foot radius is approximately 7,000 square feet with an average lot width of approximately 60 feet. Again, the entire neighborhood is zoned R1 single-family residential. You see before you a close-up. Again, there's the single-family home that's in the front half of the lot with the detached garage, which is attached to the second unit to the rear. The parcel map that was presented by the applicant features 3 lots, one which would have frontage off of Altura Avenue and 2 rear lots which would essentially be flag lots. The minimum lot size for R1 single-family zoned lots is 5,500 square feet. And the parcel map, the subdivision code of the General Municipal Code, that is, requires that all new parcels be greater than the average lot size within 500 feet. So again, this project complies with the subdivision code in regards to the minimum lot size. The subdivision code also addresses minimum lot width. And this particular subdivision features a lot width of 70 feet for the first one fronting Altura Avenue with 15-foot driveways or flag lots for the 2 rears, again in compliance with code. You'll notice that Lot 1 is a parcel that's 7,500 square feet. Lot 2 is a parcel of 7,500 square feet. And the rear lot, a parcel 8,600 square feet. You see before you a map with the 500-foot radius. You'll notice that there are 3 existing flag lot developments within 500 feet for a total of 6 flag lots, so there is a precedence within the immediate neighborhood. Here's a table outlining the tentative tract map's compliance with code, and again, the primary features were lot size, and as seen here, the average lot size within the area is 7,167 square feet, and all of these parcels comply or are above that average, and that the lot width be greater than the average lot width within the area, and in this case, which is approximately 60 feet. And again, all of the proposed lots comply with this particular standard as well. This case went before the Planning Commission, originally with staff recommendation of approval, given that the project was numerically in compliance with all of the subdivision code requirements, both for lot width, lot size, and the precedence of existing flag lots within the general neighborhood. Following much discussion by the Planning Commission, and public testimony, the Planning Commission essentially pointed out the fact that when you take a look at the schematic drawings of the proposed homes on the 3 lots, there would essentially be very little open space and setback once you eliminate both the areas behind, which again there are 2 existing oak trees which are proposed to be preserved, and if you also eliminate the areas for the driveways. So if you exclude the driveways, the 2 rear flag lots would not essentially comply with the minimum lot requirements for the subdivision. And again, the perceived massing on those 2 rear lots, if you exclude the driveways, would be much greater because, again, the buildable area is much larger when you include the flag lots for floor area ratios and floor and building massing. But if you eliminate those, you would have much more compact, much denser type of development patterns. The Planning Commission ultimately decided to deny the 3-parcel subdivision 4-0 due to the fact that they felt that the shape and the size of the proposed lots would be incompatible with the shape and the size of the lots in the immediate area. If you take a look also, the next slide shows the existing neighborhood patterns, and you'll notice the existing flag lots. But then when you overlay the proposed subdivision upon the current lot size, you'll notice that it's broken down into a pattern that might not be compatible or consistent with the neighborhood. And then if you add in the actual proposed building footprints, you'll notice that, again, this is the argument that was made by the Planning Commission, that ultimately the shape and the size of this particular three-parcel subdivision would not be compatible. There was also a comment made by the Planning Commission that given the existing lots, 2 lots to the east and 2 lots to the west, all 4 of those lots are 50 feet wide by 236 feet deep, so that essentially the project could be redesigned to feature 2 lots with the same type of lot width and depth as the adjacent lots. The project, like I mentioned, was ultimately denied by Planning Commission and has been appealed by the property owner and obviously the subdivider, the applicant for the 3-parcel subdivision. That concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the staff before we go to the public? All right. I'll wait for Mr. Quintero. Yes, I did. I have to excuse myself for a moment to go to my office, and so I'm going to turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and call Richard Barone. Since you're the appellant who has appealed this case, you have 15 minutes to make your case. That includes you and also your attorney.
Thank you.
Marty?
Okay, well, good evening. Mr. Mayor is gone at the moment, but members of the City Council, my name is Richard Barron. I live at 3525 Altura. I have lived there for 10 years. I am the owner of this property with my wife, the applicant for the parcel map and appellant. I have discussed this matter with my attorney, who believes he cannot fairly present my case without a continuance. The neighborhood petition has been in the city since November 3. If the neighbors were fair, they would have sent a copy to us. It makes no difference now that the petition will not be part of the record. Everyone knows about it and generally knows it opposes my project. The needlessly aggressive posture of the City Council in denying my request for a continuance shows that there was never any interest in granting me a fair hearing. For that reason, proceeding with the defense of my project will be an exercise in futility. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
So in other words, you don't want to continue with this hearing?
No, sir. What I said was that I cannot defend the appeal. That's all I said.
Okay. Peter Wright?
Peter is not here. I'm representing myself.
Okay. Please stick around. We may have questions from you later.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, not now. After we go through all of these, then you come back.
Oh, no.
Linda Winfield. Three minutes.
Good evening. Thank you, Councilman, for granting me this opportunity. Delia, I applaud you. This totally supports 100% our argument. And Mr. Barron's correct. He cannot defend this. He can't defend it with a petition, without a petition, with his attorney here, without his attorney here. 3,500, that's my house. I've lived there 20 years. I purchased the house. My husband and I purchased the house because we absolutely adored its location. The house is run down and old, and we've done a lot to make the house a nice home for our family and our neighbors. We've done everything we could to make our home nicer. I think your pictures say it all, Delia, and I really, really appreciate that. I know that you received emails from me, and I hope that you give give serious consideration to denying this appeal.
Ms. Winfield, I have a question. You're against this subdivision because it's 3 parcels. Would you have an objection if this was 2 parcels, which is more consistent?
We discussed this at the Planning Commission. That would be very consistent, in fact, with the neighborhood.
And you would not have any problems?
No, I'm done responsibly. No, because right now it's really, 6 feet from my fence, and we're talking about a 2-story, 3,500 square foot home.
So it's not that you're against the subdivision of this property, you just think that
it needs to be
it's
done in a
being
responsible
maximum.
manner,
Okay.
absolutely.
Got it. Mr. Najarian.
I have a question, but before I do, I think I need to make a disclosure regarding Ms. Winfield. She and I are both from the great northeastern Ohio region and deeply celebrate a bond with the Cleveland Browns. She was also a 4th grade, right? Third grade teacher of Christopher. So my question is, now that that's out of the way, do you have an opinion on, and Vilya, help me on this, the proposed homes are 3,500 square feet?
They are under 3,500 square feet, but just under, correct.
Are you concerned with the size of those homes, whether it's a 2-lot split?
This question, again, was addressed at the Planning Commission. If, in fact, the lot is divided down the middle, and they have 2 long, narrow lots with access from Altura, I don't expect that the development will happen within 6 feet of my home. That wouldn't make any sense. To be consistent with the setback, they're going to be large homes. I understand that that's legal based on the square footage of the property. But yes, they're going to be large homes, but they're not going to be so close to mine that people will be literally looking into my backyard from...
Well, you're 3,500 Prospect, not Altura.
No, I'm to the back.
I see. And so I guess your preference would be a lot in similar shape to the ones...
Absolutely.
Exactly, let's say
Because
to the
if you
west, I guess.
If you look at the way the driveways are designed, there'll be people pulling up virtually to my fence to get into their own property they spent quite a bit of money to buy, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So it's just overdevelopment for the neighborhood. Seriously, if you have an opportunity to drive by, you would see it just... But I think Vilya's drawings and her presentation have been wonderful.
Thank you.
I have a question for the, not for you, ma'am, for the staff.
Mr. Quintero.
Do you have any idea when the other lot splits took place? There's 1, 2, 3 properties with lot splits. Do you know? Was it something that was done? I drove around there, but do you know if it was done in the 50s, 60s, 90s? No one knows.
We would be able to find that information for you, but
I'm just curious.
Do not have that at our fingertips. And just for clarification, the proposed, now again, schematic drawings of the 3 proposed homes are purely schematic. And these have not gone before the design review board. This is just to show you an example that that these particular lots would be buildable under today's zoning code. And the proposed homes appear to be in the range anywhere from 2,400 to 25, so they're much less than 35. But they would still be essentially 20,
I think
25.
last time we basically said that the homes are not relevant. This is a lot split.
Correct. This would be the lot split.
Talking about lots.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Najarian.
That wasn't our rationale in our analysis last week, but I will be proposing an amendment to our municipal code next week on that issue.
All right. Let me even modify or add to that. It was not everyone's issue last time. In any case.
Next card. I give you another.
I think that was the last card.
No, there's one more. That was the one that denied. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I saw the address. Carol Gibson.
That's the last card. And then the gentleman comes back again.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond and City Council members. I'm really glad the map is still up there. My house is that little puny one, 3504. Can you see it right there? It would be completely dwarfed by 3 two-story homes.
Your name for the record also.
Oh, I thought I did. I'm sorry. Carol Gibson, 3504 Prospect Avenue.
And this would be the home.
Yes, so mine's that little puny one, and it was built as a part of an entire development after World War II. These were 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes of around 1,000 square feet for returning veterans. And I have not remodeled mine, as many people have not. We still have 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes. They're very modest. The neighbor behind me, Richard Barron, wants permission to divide his already subdivided lot of 2 into 3 to build 3 two-story homes. The Planning Commission has unanimously denied his request, and I'm asking you again tonight to deny his request to overbuild in our modest neighborhood. We have very few two-story homes in our neighborhood. His proposed subdivision and overbuilding would seriously impact the integrity of our neighborhood of mostly 2-bedroom homes. The value of my property will decrease if 3 two-story homes are packed into a flag lot subdivision right behind my backyard. I am upset at the thought of cars coming and going on 3 separate driveways with lights shining into my bedroom at night. I love my neighborhood, and I'm grateful to live in the community where I work. I have been teaching 2nd grade at Mountain Avenue Elementary School in La Crescenta for 14 years. I'm tired at the end of the day with working with 7- and 8-year-olds. My home is my sanctuary. I enjoy spending time in my backyard, gardening, and looking at the Verdugo Mountains, which seem so close that I can almost touch them. I do not think Mr. Barron should be allowed to subdivide and build 3 two-story homes. If he does, and then sells the homes and moves on, the rest of us are stuck with an overcrowded neighborhood. Please, do not overturn the Planning Commission's decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. We have a question for you. Councilmember Najarian.
Hi, Ms. Gibson. I have a question, and you used the word overbuild, and you were talking about your home is about 1,000 square feet, and then you were talking about what you believe to be Mr. Barron. Is that his name?
Yes.
Mr. Barron. Mr. Barron's intent to build 3 two-story homes.
He gave us the plans.
I understand. And let me ask you this question. What if there were this is a what if, it's a hypothetical, I won't hold you to anything, but I just want to know your general feeling. If the proposed homes on those 3 lots were 1,000 square foot homes, 2-bedroom, 1-bath,
Well,
still feel it's overbuilding? Is it the number of homes or the size of them?
Both. I am concerned about both. There are already 2 homes on that lot. Right now, there are 2 homes there. I've been living with it for 8 years. 3 would be way too many, and especially when you add a second story on it.
But let's leave a second story out.
Okay.
Let's say that as a condition for a 3-lot split.
I'm against
Let me just
it.
say that there were a 1,000 square foot home on each of those lots, and that was the only home that could be built. Would you still feel that it was overbuilding?
Yes, I would.
So it's the number of homes necessarily, not...
It's very hard for me to separate those 2 items, because you can see where that last house is. That's my fence right there, that blue line. And people would be literally in my backyard, and I'm opposed to it.
It is also, I just would like to add, it's also very difficult for me as a councilman, when I look at the 4 corners of this municipal ordinance, whereas the number of homes can be, I think, taken into account, obviously, and its effect on the neighborhood. The style of the homes and the size of the homes aren't specifically before us.
Okay.
So that's the problem I had last week, and everyone saw my problems, and I made it clear, and maybe we'll discuss it again next week when we talk about findings on the Whiting Woods homes. But thank you for clearing up that issue, and that's, I think that supports, I'm more comfortable with you saying that it's the number of homes that you have a problem with, as opposed to a two-story
All right.
home on 3 two-story homes, which may or may not come to fruition on them.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all?
I believe it is, unless Councilmember Quintero has
Thank
a
you.
question for you. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Okay. We would then return to Mr. Barron for a closing. How much time would you like, Mr. Barron?
30 seconds, sir.
Well,
Just a few minutes.
sure. Well, let's start with 3 minutes and see how you make out.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, thank you so much for listening to my presentation here. I do respect you as a council and to make your decisions as you see. And I will at this time simply reiterate that without a continuance, I cannot defend this appeal. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Barron. All right. I have no other speaker cards, so I'll go to Mr. Quintero.
Okay. No questions.
Can I just make a comment? And this is, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
This is just to reiterate the point that Mr. Howard made with respect to the issue of the continuance in the council going forward.
And the petition.
And the petitions. Again, as you know, the petitions were not made part of this record. And in any event, the material that would contain those petitions would not have unduly, in our opinion, unduly influenced this hearing. And in fact, as the council member stated, they were not even aware of the petition until tonight and haven't seen it. So, again, to reiterate that point for the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Quintero.
Okay, I am opposed to the lot split. As I drove around the neighborhood, and now with this added information, I don't think it's appropriate for this neighborhood. On one of the slides that we were shown, I counted there's approximately 90 lots within 500 feet of this property. And basically there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's basically 6 homes that are on flag lots or part of flag lots. So in other words, 6 out of 90. So I don't have any interest at all in splitting a property that would result in 3 homes in essence, on one parcel and one lot. And as to the idea of just a lot split where you'd have 2 properties on that lot, I'll reserve my judgment until I'm presented with the plan, because I would hate to see 2 large homes in this neighborhood. I just don't think it's appropriate. I don't think it conforms with the rest of the neighborhood. And so, like I say, I'm opposed to this particular split, and I'm not exactly sure that I'm going to go for 2 on a lot. They're 2 large homes.
Councilmember Najarian.
Well, I feel, obviously, our initial discussion was about whether to continue this or not, and I do feel badly that we did proceed forward with this despite the request for a little extra time to work on things with the neighbors. Perhaps one of those could have been a compromise to a 2-lot split. We don't know that. Mr. Wright left, I guess. The attorney left.
I'm representing myself.
I understand, and I think that perhaps puts being a lawyer, and I know it puts the client in a difficult position where you think you've got your attorney up till 10 minutes before the presentation, and then it's adios. I also have a problem with our general process in this, and I'll be discussing this a little bit further. We're looking at houses that are not approved, footprints of homes that are not approved by DRB, that we are all taking into account as being too large for the neighborhood. And the neighbors, Mrs. Gibson talked about the homes being too large, but later on clarification, I think she made her point clearer that it's the number of homes that are of concern to her. I feel more comfortable with that rationale than describing a house that may or may never be built. So what I'd like to do is when we do deal with these in the future, that we have a firmer commitment to a home. It's possible that Mr. Barron put a little postage-sized home on each one of those lots and said, this is what I intend to build. Lot split is approved. Guess what? I don't like those little postage stamp homes. I want a two-story home. That's not fair to the neighbors. That's not fair to council or planning staff. And just the converse, what we saw last week with the Whiting Woods, there was a monster house on there. The applicants later said, well, that's not really what we intended to build. It was just a placeholder. And I think a lot of us, not all of us, some of us put some weight on that style of house to deny the application. That being said, I think that 3 homes of whatever size are excessive for this particular micro neighborhood, if you will. If you even get a lot shorter than the 500 square foot, the 500-foot radius. I may feel comfortable with 2. I know one of the speakers said 2 homes would be more appealing. I don't know if that works out economically for Mr. Barron. I mean, that's a decision that he has to make when he crunches his numbers. A more appropriate split would be a longitudinal split of the lot with perhaps, what would that make it, about a 75-foot frontage or thereabouts, and that would give him 2 lots to build modest-sized homes on. That's where I'm going, but I do feel bad that his attorney is not here and he's sort of left out on his own at the last minute.
Thank you, Councilmember Najarian. Councilmember Yusefian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll tell you where I come from. I look at lot splits on by themselves. I'll give you one of those Bobisms so you could write that down. Take
The book
that
is
book
gone.
out.
The book is gone. It's with the publisher, so wait
Look
for
at
the
this.
second edition.
Okay. Look at this is what size bread do you want, and then what you put on it afterwards. So first you have to decide the size of the toast, and then you decide you want jam on it, or you want peanut butter on it, or what do you want on it. So I'm not even looking at all of those stuff. First we have to look at that. How many times do you want to cut that piece of bread into pieces? Just look at those lots. Look at the lots on the bottom, and you could see a large lot. It's kind of angular because it's an odd shape due to the property lines. Then the one next to it and the one next to it. This was a large lot, and then the other 2. At one point, probably they were all large lots. They were about 100-foot frontage and 200 and some odd feet deep. Later on, after they were probably done in the 20s, no different than what happened on Glen Oaks Canyon at one point. They did these things were 100 frontage, 200 deep, and then later on somebody bought some of these things and divided them down the middle into 50 foot by 200 feet. And that's what they did with some of these. This particular property just stayed the original size that it was. No different than what happened in Glen Oaks Canyon. The reason I'm so familiar with this type of subdivision is because my house happens to be one of those houses that the property owner in the 40s took a lot similar to this and put in 3 lots, split them into 3 lots. And when you look at the whole map of the whole street, you will see everyone pretty much has this rectangular lots, except when it comes to the last 3, which is kind of oddball. And that's the compatibility factor of what we talk about when it comes to lots. I will tell you, if this was a down the middle, 2 lots, to keep it compatible and consistent with the other lots adjacent to it, I would approve it without questions. But the way it is, even if there was a 500 square foot house on it, I still deny it. because the lot itself is not compatible with what's adjacent to it. And that's what the argument I made last time. I couldn't care what type of a house it was on. My argument was splitting that lot in half was inconsistent with the neighborhood compatibility of that area. So I stick with the same rules this time, which is it's inconsistent with what's adjacent to it, and if there was 2, I would approve it. 3, I don't care how you work it out, I still will deny that. Or even if you had a 2-lot split that had a different configuration, you also have to consider that. So that's why I'm going to deny this. It could have 2 flag lots just like the other one, and I don't think I would approve that if it was 2 flag lots. But if it was split right down, it would be consistent with the 2 above and 2 south. It will be harmonious with the neighborhood. So I have no problem with that. That's why I'm going to agree with the Planning Commission, even though I disagreed with them last week. So I'll agree with them this time.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Yusefian. Several issues have been raised, or comments have been raised about property we looked at, a lot split that we looked at, was it last week? Mm-hmm. Seems like longer ago. Last week, related to design of houses on it, and I know that that was not the key factor in my mind, but it was a factor in the sense that when it is a lot split, that because of the slope of the property and other issues, compel the owner to build to site a house in a particular way, because very clearly not going to be parking a house on a slope where it is not buildable, then I think that the design has bearing without any other guidance in the municipal code. But that isn't the case here anyhow, for me anyway. This is not about whether or not this lot split will compel a particular placement of the house, for example, without a setback. This is a different issue. For me, this is purely compatibility. I know this neighborhood very, very well. Look at Altura Avenue, go north to Prospect, then Community, and then Marianne Street. I didn't grow up within this 500 feet, but I grew up outside of it on Marianne Street, not this block, but in the 3400 block. I know this area.
In the corner?
It is, it's
right there.
Yeah. And these were homes that were purchased by most people at the time on the GI Bill, many of them. This was an area that was, one of the speakers mentioned these are modest homes. That is exactly what they are. I wish I knew when these other lot splits were done and created. I know that was asked and we didn't have an answer. I think that's a key element here. That we don't have that information, I think, is a key factor. But it would be interesting to know whether they were done before this was even a piece of Glendale. This was an annex, and it only occurred, it was only annexed in 1952, I believe. So it may not have even been the city of Glendale at the time. It's hard to know without that information. In any case, it is now part of our city, and this is too much for this lot. This is too much for this neighborhood, as far as I'm concerned. There may be a time, years down the line, when the predominant thing in this neighborhood might be some other type of lot or size lot or even size home. But at least at this time, I don't believe that to be another lot split there to be compatible with the neighborhood. That is by far the vast minority of what is going on with the properties there. These are small, modest homes, and I think that this is not an appropriate action. So I will not be supporting that, and I will be supporting the decision of the Planning Commission. Councilmember Quintero.
For no further comments, I'll move 9D1, motion denying the tentative parcel map.
Let me close the hearing.
I'll second the motion.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Okay, there isn't. Mr. Kosaki, yes. You looked like you wanted to say something. I'm sorry. Mr. Kosaki, and then please.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian? Mayor Draymond?
Yes.
I'll move 9D2, a motion directing the...
No, 9D was if you wanted to approve it.
No final writing.
All right. Mr. Kasakian, could you take us to the next item, please?
Mr. Mayor, at this point, we will address oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes in this portion. Council may question or respond to the speakers, but there will be no debate or decision, and city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for an investigation and a report.
Okay, thank you very much. Our first speaker is Barry Allen. 5 minutes, followed by Evelyn Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council, staff, and of course the public. I'm Barry Allen with Van Guardians. We see a lot of activity here, and we've had a lot of public hearings, but I've yet to hear a response from the city relative to the actions of the fire department when a woman died in a fire on Lorraine Street, and why it took the fire apparatus almost 7 minutes to get there at 2 o'clock in the morning. The answer to that question is still unresolved. And we're able to take a lot of time on the public hearings, but yet I'm waiting for the city council to address financial issues. We have yet to see the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending June 30th of 2008. Maybe it really doesn't make any difference, but I think it does. I think that's a tool that this council needs in order to make the decisions that it does on finances. We agree to hire a number of consultants. We don't even know how many consultants the city has now, or how many contract employees, or how many dollars we spend on consultants. We're totally out of the loop. Has the city seen the first quarter of the present fiscal year? Have you seen the revenues that we've actually brought in July, August, and September? Have you seen documentation on the expenditures during that same period? These are questions that I get from Van Guardians, from people throughout the city. And these are questions that we have to codify and make Public Records Act requests. Documents that take us 10 days to 24 days in order to be able to resolve questions that we have. And we do try to respond to those as quickly as we can to the public. And the public is just as frustrated as I am. We're coming into an election season where 3 of the people that sit on this council will be running for re-election. And in order to be able to comprehensively respond to questions, these same candidates, incumbents, need to have the answers when the public asks the questions, and they don't. And that goes off to the city management as to why these questions aren't being able to be answered. And I call upon you to look at those things today and come back with answers next week, next month, or maybe even during a candidates forum. Thank you. I'm Barry Allen.
Okay, thank you. Well, you could hold it. All right.
From here.
Evelyn Hanson, followed by Anahit Benidjian.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, council members. Earlier this year, I came before you and I talked about my water bill, $1,800 for 2 months for water bill. I mentioned that I was scheduled for an audit. I had the audit done, and the results were rather perplexing. You've got copies of my sheets. You've got 4 pieces of paper. 2 are for energy cost, 2 are for water cost. The energy cost, we're having show it and tell again, just like we did last time. The energy, the periods are June of '07 to June of '08 in one report, September '07 to September '08 in another report. I was quite tickled, in the first one, it said that for the year, I spent $1,700 on electricity. Got that one, and then the next day, I got the one that said that for the year, I spent $361 for electricity. I like the second one better. I only wish it were true. In the first one on energy, it said my usage in order was for refrigerators, heaters, freezers, and fans. In the second one, it's refrigerators, lighting, fans, and heaters. I could see the numbers being a little bit screwy if they even mentioned the same things. There are extras in the more expensive one. The order is even different. So I don't know, it can't be just a few things added in, because the order of my usage is different. I'm wondering, where do they get these numbers? Do they just use a dartboard? That's what it looks like. If we look at the water for the June periods versus September periods, $5,329 in water versus $65 in water. I like the $65 in water much, much better. I pay more than that just in sewer fees for 1 month. It says I use, in order again, showers and baths, faucets, toilets, and laundry and lawn versus showers and baths, toilets, and faucets. Again, we're out of order. So it can't just be adding a few things in on one that wasn't on the other. The order is different. One thing that I'm really wondering is, how much did we pay for these? And did we pay for 2? And if they're throwing a dartboard if they're throwing darts at a dartboard, I can do that just as easily. You'll see that they have a miscellaneous outdoor usage. Even on the expensive one, it says that I spent $16 on water for my half-acre yard, which is where the majority of my water goes. They said I have a lawn. Lawn is the bane of water usage. There's no way I would have a lawn. The lawn isn't on the alternate, the $65 printout. For that one, I just spent $1.94 on miscellaneous outdoor, which I could see that covering my yard, but not for such a minuscule amount. I would recommend that if we're in a budget crisis, we're having money problems, we might take a look at how we're spending our money, because this is a real waste. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanson. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Hanson, before you sit down, again, I'm not familiar with the techniques of the audit, nor am I familiar with your property, but just reading what you distributed here, the smaller item is labeled guest. Do you have a guest house or a second little house in the property?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, they have audited they've audited your main house and your guest house, and there's 2 separate sets of figures. One relates to the smaller structure, the other one relates to the larger structure on your property, which is probably the main account. So
it's all one account.
Well, I'm not referencing accounts. I think they went through, though, and looked at what's happening in each of these structures and have probably drawn some conclusions on split out of cost based on what they have seen in these structures, because, again, I'm not familiar with the property. One is labeled guest, the other one isn't. So I presume there's a main structure, a main residence, and a secondary residence. They've tried to give you some split out on each. Well, I think that's what's attempted here.
That's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but the guest house doesn't have any miscellaneous outside.
Well, again, they just may be drawing some general conclusions based on broad usages, but I think that explains why you have 2 and why they are so different. And I'd suggest you contact GWP to get a better explanation of some of these categories within each one. I'm just looking at it on the surface of what's labeled here.
And the guest house doesn't have a refrigerator. There's no portable heater out there, no air conditioner.
Again, I'd suggest you talk to GWP about where some of these came from.
I guess that was a question that was just asked if it doesn't have a permit.
Does it have a permit?
I think was the
It was it was actually the original house that was built for the family to live in while the main house was being built. During the 3+ years it took to build the main house. So yes, it does have a permit. It's part of the original permit.
Original
Thank you.
grant.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hanson. Okay, Anahit Panigian, followed by Bruce Philpott. Okay, looks like she's gone. Okay, Bruce Philpott. There he is. Followed by Margaret Hammond.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, members of the council and staff and the public. My name is Bruce Philpott. Over the course of the last 6 months, the City Council has conducted several special meetings. The first was to find ways to cut $10 million from the 2009 budget because that was the projected deficit. The shortfall was fairly easy to understand. The revenues were going to be $10 million less than expenditures. So the council took the unprecedented step of cutting positions in the police and fire departments, as well as other operating departments that include the library, parks, and recreation. During those deliberations, most of you spoke of the need to increase revenues so this problem would not be repeated. After passing the budget, you followed up with more special meetings specifically to find new revenues. And to the extent that added revenues are deemed desirable, you were quite successful. You raised many fees associated with utilities, parking, inspections, planning, building, and safety. You even created several new resources of revenues, a never-before-imposed $360 inspection fee on buildings under 75 feet, and a 6.8% technology fee. You also authorized staff to increase all revenues up to 5% annually without your approval based on the CPI. But as you will probably know by now, this added revenue will not come close to what will be needed to balance next fiscal year's budget. According to an article in the Glendale News Press on November 10th of this year, new car sales are off 23%, jewelry stores are off 22%, building, light industry, specialty stores are off by double digits. The bottom line is that revenues for next year, in reflecting the overall poor condition of our economy, will fall well below the projections that were made just a few months ago. Making this even more worrisome, we can project a huge growth on the expenditure side, with greater pension contributions that have grown from $4 to $20 million in just the last several years, and contractually binding payroll increases that will add several million more dollars next year. I don't see that you have any other choice but to significantly reduce expenditures. As a moral issue alone, we cannot burden the next generation with any more long-term bond debt that has been the practice of this body in recent years when faced with deficits. The solution cannot come from raising more taxes, permits, and fees because you have already maximized those revenue sources. Looking ahead at next fiscal year's budget, the gap between expenditures and revenue is again going to be in the millions of dollars, and you will gain little, if any, by cutting any more library services or adding untenable fees to youth programs operating in our parks. In light of these circumstances, I urge the City Council to take immediate steps and open up the current budget and begin to make additional cuts in this fiscal year. To start, you can stop all out-of-city and state employee-related conferences, extend the life of some of your vehicle fleet, and cut overtime to the bone. You can charge department heads with further cuts and hold them accountable. You can also apply some of the measures that private businesses are forced to do when confronted with large cash flow problems. You can alert the city labor unions that they will have to share in this burden and forego expected pay increases. It is troubling enough that several of these unions already have multi-year contracts that assure them a pay increase, and in one case, 11% over the next 18 months, which will add another $11 million to that single payroll. I would also ask the City Council to be open and honest about the looming financial condition of the city and share this information with the public in a format that is readily understood. It is better to let the public know now rather than have them find out later. Officials in our local public schools, including our city college, have made the public aware of their financial problems and the possible impact it will have on their staff and students. Everyone knows by now, I've just one more quick statement. Everyone knows by now, based upon the general economy of this country and region, that the city is going to face a growing financial problem. These problems are not beyond our ability to solve, but they must be addressed now and include all stakeholders. These are not normal times, and we cannot apply normal practices to correct them. The financial health of our city, short and long term, hinges on the decisions this body makes in the next few months.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Philpott. Okay. Margaret Hammond, followed by Kristen Arbid.
Thank you, Margaret.
Okay.
Sure.
And now, will that add to your sentence? Because if you break the...
Probably. That's why you put it in, didn't you?
I'll put in some more. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff, and audience. My name is Margaret Hammond. We have to laugh at something this time, tell you. Especially, I don't know how many of you, I became absolutely... a prisoner of the TV because I happened to be awake on Friday night when the fire broke out up in Sylmar, and ended up until 4 o'clock in the morning and got up the next morning, and it just horrifying. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but the idea of this horrible fire-breathing dragon that was in our community in our beautiful Southern California, that they call it the wind, what is it? It's the firestorms. The winds caused the firestorms. But just terrible, just how it would pop all over the place. I think that we should thank God that there was nobody lost in it. I mean, particularly in that mobile home with those seniors. How that happened, that they were managed to be rescued, is absolutely amazing. One of the reasons being was brought out that they had that drill the day before on the earthquake, and the manager and they had to go all through it, and apparently they had some kind of a warning system or whatever, and that was what really helped them to get all those people out of there. I mean, you're disabled, whatever, mentally, a lot of them problems, seniors, is amazing that they got out. And we need to keep them in our thoughts, and we need to remember that, within 2 weeks it's going to be Thanksgiving. And we do need to try and help people any way we can, whether they're from our immediate community or close by. I think in any way we can help the Red Cross, whoever. I know I will definitely feel very strongly in trying to do that. Now, talking about that, I believe we were under a red flag warning, and I was sitting in my house Saturday evening, and I heard these big boom booms, and is that the generator, which has happened before, going out down in the area there on Glendale Avenue? Well, I guess it was Mr. Caruso letting off his fireworks. I don't see what fireworks have to do with Christmas, but okay. But aside from that, if we were under a red flag warning, why is he letting off fireworks? None of us could do it. We'd be flung in the clink. So I'm just saying, I think there has to be some kind of a thought about this, that why people get preferential treatment because they have so much money and whatnot. And especially, well, he has a lot of money since we gave him over $100 million of our property, and which he was deeded by the people in power at the time. Now, one of the things I'd like to bring up continually is the problem in the 1200 block of Oak Ridge, that there's dumping in that area continually, as fast as the people pick it up. Right now, there's a huge pile of building junk, old wood, old timber. They've done building, they've done whatever, and torn it out, and it's on a vacant lot, not in front of their house. It's on a lot that belongs to the people that are up above. They dump there continually. It's absolutely disgusting. And there's an old toilet there, and I don't know what else right now. But why? The quality of life of my neighborhood, of the neighborhood, is being affected by these people continually dumping. I just wish that the neighbors, some of the neighbors must know who's doing this. It happens to be around the corner from where I live. But I just think it's disgusting. I mean, why don't they pay and have it taken to the dump? Why should they make our street a dump for their old junk all the time? Every week it goes on and on. And they pick it up from the city, but I'm saying it's disgusting. So I really feel that I hope that the neighbors there will finally stand up and do something about it. The last thing of all is San Fernando Road. You didn't answer me last time as to not only when is it going to be started, when is it going to be finished. I'm getting older every day. I'm beginning to almost give up on it. And all my friends that live in that area over there around Pelinconi keep asking me, Margaret. And I said, I'll keep asking. I won't give up. I'm going to keep asking every week till I find out when it's not only going to get started, but when it's going to get completed. Put something in there so that it doesn't look so disgusting and barren and awful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Christian Arbid, followed by Nick Franklin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Artie, if you wouldn't mind just passing this out briefly. Good evening. My name is Christian Arbid, resident of Glendale, real estate broker and loss mitigator, office at 100 North Brand. I wanted to bring to your attention this evening a document that was delivered to my office for review and some direction. And in particular, it's not really relevant, what the property is located, rather than just to say that it is a short sale, or what we refer to as a pre-foreclosure property in Glendale. My purpose before coming to you this evening is to bring up an idea and a concept. During a time that we are struggling to find dollars and in an economy that is sluggish, this report that was provided by the City of Glendale, it is the Neighborhood Services Department, is by far above board. And let me just kind of retract. This document, or this letter rather, is upon a request of a buyer, a home buyer, or a real estate officer or a realtor that can call the city and request such a report. But the purpose for my coming out here this evening is when I reviewed this document, by far it exceeds any home inspection report I've ever seen. It is well written. It is well thought out. It is probably one of the best reports I've ever seen that is, beyond any home inspection report you would ever get. And my point is the following. This document protects a buyer. It protects the realtor. And the city provides this service free of charge. In a time where we're looking for dollars and we're putting, parking meters on Brand and $1 to park here and $2 to park there, I think the city should charge. I think the city should charge the home buyer, and even in my office, I would make it mandatory. This report is excellent. When a home buyer buys a property, they'll spend at least $300, $400, $500 for a home inspector to come in and take a look at the property. And home inspectors not qualified to discuss what permits were taken on the home. What the city of Glendale provides here are a permit for a water heater, a permit for a residential re-roof. I mean, extensive detail on a home that a homeowner, I think, would find a report like this to be a treasure, and it would protect everyone involved. So while I was sitting in the back of the room this evening, I decided to put my BlackBerry to use and find out some statistical information. So as of this evening, there's 686 homes for sale in the city of Glendale. 396 foreclosures. So when you add those up, it's roughly a little over 1,000 real estate transactions that would occur. If we charged, the city would charge $500, and we did just half those homes, $500 at 500 homes, that would bring us to $250,000 of income, of revenue that would be brought into the city. So my point to you this evening is I'd like for you to consider that, and I'm just giving you 250,000 reasons to think about maybe possibly integrating this, because this report by far is an excellent demonstration, and the fact that the city provides that free of charge is remarkable and above board. So thank you very much for your time this evening, and I look forward to maybe hearing some thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Arbid. Nick Franklin, followed by Mike Mohill.
Did he had it already?
Hi, my name is Nick Franklin, and I just live right across the street and around the corner. I'm not going to take long. I'm just here to say thank you for all your help to all of we who are in the community and we who are disabled. And I've been very fortunate to make a very nice number of friends through the city, and I won't mention any names because I wouldn't want to leave anybody out. But I'm very grateful for everything that is done for all of us who live in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Thank you very much. It's nice to hear sometimes. Thanks. Okay. Mike Mohill, followed by Nancy Kent.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mike Mohill. I came tonight to talk about the aquatic center, but it was canceled, the discussion on it. But I did read about the report that was published about the aquatic center on Pacific Park, and you, I believe you all got the documentation as a packet this evening. And I was reading it, and I got to page 5 of the document. And it was very troubling where it says annual operating cost. If you would please turn to that page. It says the following: staff estimates the annual maintenance, operating and program cost of the project could range from approximately $375 million. Excuse me, it says $1 million here. For a summer-only 6-lane pool, to approximately $740,000 for a year-round 8-lane pool. Is it an error? Am I correct about that? That's an error. Okay. What troubles me also, Councilman, is the fact that on the first page, Mr. George Champion, who makes about $175,000, signed off on it. Mr. David Aham, project administrator, $125,000 in income, signed off on it. $100,000 income by Mr. Peter, Parks Development Project Manager. Our city manager, who makes $250,000, signed off on this, and was also reviewed by the city attorney, who makes $220,000 a year, and Madeline Blake, $175,000. That's $1 million in salaries, and I'm supposed to believe this report. It's very troubling. Can we trust what we're reading, what the staff gives us, and then the managers sign off on it? $375 million. It's just a typo error. what does that mean about our budget? Is it also just a typo error? Recently, I understand that the chess park, which was completed a couple years ago for $500,000, is now being entered into the books. And the finance manager just left for greener pastures. This is very troubling to have reports like this to be presented to the public. This was on the internet, mind you, so everybody can read. Now, I only have a college education. I don't have a master's degree. And I didn't go to Harvard or Yale, but Cal State Los Angeles, and I didn't go to USC. I'm just an average college student who was able to read, and nobody else picked up on it. But we have $1 million in salaries, and they didn't read it either. Very disturbed. Thank you, gentlemen. I hope the staff this time can find where the commas and the dots go for the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Mohill. Nancy Kent, followed by Rita Unikian.
Hi, my name's Nancy Kent, resident of Southeast Glendale. First point, I would like to compliment the city on the very clear signage that has been put up about the parking changes in the downtown area. I just can't see how it could be any clearer, and it looks like it was done in a cost-effective manner. Next point. I strongly support getting a municipal pool in Glendale, and at the CDBG meeting at Horace Mann School this year, that was the first request that I made, and it's a public benefit to have a place for people to get swimming lessons and be able to cool off. This is a major purchase, and I hope that next week when this is before you, you will not rush to just approve one of the designs offered in the current staff report to get this over with. I think that the City of Glendale has a pattern of hiring designers who over-design projects. And I'll get into more details later, but the only thing I'll state tonight is that I believe when this was last on the agenda, there was a request to the designer to provide how much each element would cost, such as the water slide and the tot lot with the water features and the landscaping and separate things. And as far as I can see on the staff report, it is not clear how much each of those elements add to the cost, and I hope that you can get that, whether it's before the next council meeting or in the next round of discussion on this point. But I think it's very important for you to see the price tags on those before you add them to just the basic concept of having a swimming pool. And the last point I will reiterate is, and I said it before and I'll say it again, there's already a tot lot with water features on the southeast corner of Pacific Park, and I do not understand why that has to be torn out and what seems like similar equipment rebuilt as part of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kent. Rita Unikian, followed by Herbert Milano.
Good afternoon. My name is Rita Unikian. I have not forgot about rent control. I took a short vacation to see if people will support rent control. The economy is very bad. The rents are more every day. No one is taking about us. Why should people who work to help America not have any help from the government during this time when the economy is so bad? Every day the government helps banks and people who have money, but people who work hard and pay rent have no help. How many times do I have to say that the economy is bad? Rents are too high. America needs to help the people. I ask you to please help me to pass rent control in Glendale so senior citizens can live in Glendale and enjoy this city. I have petitioned with thousands of signatures for rent control. We want you to listen to us. I don't know English, but I don't want people here to bother me. People here try to give me things to read, but I want you to know I write my own speech. Please don't bother me, or I will tell the council who is the person bothering me. I ask the council to put rent control on the ballot, put it on the agenda, then discuss. Please, Mr. Council puts it on ballot, please. Thank you. God bless. God bless you. God bless America.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Unikian. Herbert Milano, followed by John Robert Christopher.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council. My name is Herbert Milano. From time to time, I feel that I must perhaps take advantage of this opportunity to speak to you, because when I come to speak during the earlier meetings, during the Housing Authority or the Redevelopment Agency, once I sit down, there's my words are maybe taken out of context, so there's a spin given to the presentation I make. So I might as well come over and make sure that the message was conveyed in a little bit more clear way, and so that a larger audience can understand what my advocacy is. One of my strongest interests for a long time is to ensure that the city provides transparent and frequent information on quality of life issues. And now that we're moving towards a quality of life indicators report, it is my hope that that report comes to the public on a regular basis, hopefully every year. Yesterday we saw in the Glendale News Press the issue with regard to gangs. And for a very long time, due to the amount of graffiti that I've been finding on my building, that is not too far from here throughout the years, I've been asking the question, how many gangs do we have in Glendale, and how many members do they have, and are these gangs growing? Time and time again, I've been denied the information, even though I've used the California Records Act, and I don't understand why, as a stakeholder in Glendale, and before as a resident and as a property owner, I'm denied the information that should be basic for anyone to have. But yet, when I asked for that information earlier, and I presented that I wanted the information, I've been told that there was some type of a special event taking place with the local attorneys and injunctions and so forth. But I've been asking for this information for a very long time. I'm so appreciative of individuals like Margaret Hammond and many others who go every year to do this with Glendale Beautiful, who go out there and clean up all the graffiti. And of course, we do have funds available through the Housing Authority for graffiti abatement. But if we don't track somehow how much graffiti is there, we won't be able to know on a year-to-year basis whether the problem is getting worse or is getting better. So there are ways to measure and to figure out if we really are having a continual worsening of the gang situation in Glendale, how big it is. In my opinion, graffiti is a leading indicator of crime. The more graffiti you have, it's very likely that you have more crime or more gang members. At least the graffiti signs that I've seen are depictions of gang nomenclature that they use on the walls. If we were to use, for example, the number of gallons of paint as an indicator in terms of use for the purposes of covering up graffiti, and we track that on a year-to-year basis, we would know if we have a continual problem in that regard. It's a leading indicator. And that's why reports such as the quality of life would allow us to assess whether those problems are getting worse or not. But in addition to having that information, it means that you need to use it for some type of policy decision. There are 3 policemen today assigned, plus 1 supervisor assigned to the gang unit. Just 3. And so when I look at other information with regard to the crime statistics, when it comes to aggravated assault, it's been on the decline. And when I asked for information with regard to what portion of the aggravated assault is due to young people, basically under 18, I was told that, it's a very minimal amount, but they don't have the data. So how can you set policy to prevent and then control the problem with gangs? All of a sudden, we find a big newspaper headline with regard to this problem. But if we do not measure on a continual basis, if we do not look for the leading indicators, how can you then set policy that is appropriate? But those indicators have other indicators as well. The number of high school dropouts, the number of kids who are truant, the number of families who are in need, the number of single-family homes, the kids who are not attended to. All of those social problems are linked, and it is only through a quality of life indicator report that you're able to assess that. I would expect Mr. Quintero, a well-known Democrat, to at least promote the type of issues that are relevant for you, for this city council to address. There is nothing worse to the quality of life than gangs. It's the one reason why I sold 2 buildings in Los Angeles. And the indicator for that is all the graffiti. There is a relationship. And that is the point that I want to make. The information must be transparent, must be regular, must be presented in such a way that we should be able to assess whether the situation is getting better or is getting worse. And if it is getting worse, then I will assume that you'd set policies to correct it. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Draymond, members of the council and city staff. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. With your permission, I would like to address the state of the arts in Glendale at this time. There have been recent letters in the local press about how things have changed when we used to be able to walk down the streets and enjoy our own homebred entertainments, businesses. I remember I was a projectionist in all those theaters when the Alex was open, when the Roxy was open, when the 2 Glendale theaters were open, when the United Artists was open across the street. The Chinese restaurant that was the only place that was open downtown on a Christmas holiday is still open. I remember fond memories of going there when I was working on a theater, reminding me of Christmas Story, which was running about the same time. But unfortunately, the state of the art is not progressing. Today's state of the art is degressing, and we're keeping up with it. Right now, we've replaced all of the local businesses and talents with franchises. Our town center requires you to go through a hawker's bazaar before you get to the bare little grass that is roped off to be our town center. And it is a shame that we were taking $160,000 a year of allocations for the Cultural and Arts Commission and spending $140,000 of that to pay for staff, which leaves a dime a person. You're cheaper to just go to each man, woman, and child and shake them for a dime out of their pocket and give that $20,000. You cannot produce anything for $20,000. So to say that the Cultural and Arts Commission has failed in their mission is not fair at all, because we never actually seriously supported them in that, and I don't think we seriously gave them a mission to attack. Their idea was that they would take the money from the city and sponsor events and patronize artisans, but there's not enough money there to do it. So I would request that in readdressing the commission, as we're expecting the council to do several times, instead of looking to put it out into the private sector, I would say let's try and address the actual mission. I don't think it should be the point of the Culture and Arts Commission to sponsor events. It is not possible for them to afford it. What little I've seen kind of embarrasses me, because I am spoiled. My hometown of 50,000 people had a 1,400-seat theater that became a civic center after the time I was managing it. So I've enjoyed working at the Alex as a projectionist when there was an arc light in there, but to me it is not comparable to what we expect for a 200,000 population city versus what we had. And everything I see looks so small, and it would embarrass Andy of Mayberry. But if the commission was formed to support and encourage people going through the process, not just painters and sculptors, but there's a lot of filmmakers, amateur filmmakers, that will run into roadblocks like needing permits, even to shoot inside their homes within Burbank or Glendale. And we don't know the processes to follow, and how do we get around the cost of it if we can? Insurances and so on and so forth. The commission could help us very much through that. Help us go through the processes to make everything legal and legit for the city, and find ways to get waivers to encourage more people to do things, because the more people get started on the ground floor and getting used to doing nuts and bolts, professional style amateur filmmaking, the more they become an active audience for the real thing for other people. And more importantly, we need a place for artists to, when they have nothing else to do, when they're frozen in their creativity and feel like they're freaks all alone, to go and just hang out and run into other people with the same feeling, so that they know they're not freaks. We need a sort of clubhouse or a meeting place that's open, but not in a restricted way. We've had breakfast sessions where people would meet before through the Culture Commission, and people were just sort of hawking their wares to each other. But we need a place where somebody can feel like they're at home, just a clubhouse. And we could take any existing place that's out there now, like the conference room at the Alex's offices or something at the city, and open it up free without any extra cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. That's our last speaker card, and let me go to my colleagues, see if they have any comments. Mr. Yusefian, I'll start.
Thank you. A couple of comments. On the issue of the pool design, Mr. City Manager, I hope that now that we have taken it off table, it's coming back next week. I would like to see those breakdowns. They weren't there. Also, I asked for us to get some kind of understanding of what the demolition cost is of the existing items there, and what it would cost to recreate it somewhere else, specifically the Todd lot. Also, when are we going to get the CAFR for 2008?
I don't know offhand. I'll have to ask Mr. Elliott.
Generally, it goes from June to June. I figured I'd give you a couple of more months to get it together.
It's not uncommon for it to be in the October-November timeframe, so I would expect shortly, but we'll get you a specific date.
Because I asked, and they gave me the 2007 one, and when I asked, well, gee, this is 2007, where's 2008, they told me that it's coming. So I'd like to get that.
Part of that wrap-up is the auditor to meet with me, and that meeting has been scheduled, so they're apparently wrapping it up.
Okay. So. Okay. Thank you. So I would appreciate that. On the issue of gangs and graffiti that Mr. Milano brought up, I think I have seen documents in the city that I have read. I think the neighborhood services basically calculates the graffiti based on square footage, if I'm not mistaken. So when he was talking about the amount of gallons that it takes, they actually go out there and they calculate how many square feet of graffiti they have painted over. And that's how they compare one year to another. So maybe if there's a way I could get something comparative to what we was last year and this year. I'm pretty sure Sam probably has it on the tip of his fingers. That would be appreciated. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yusefian. Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. Mr. Allen here. Made some very salient.
Yes, he's in the back.
You made some very salient points. However, the one point you did raise that threw me back in my chair is that when you said that three of us up here are running for re-election. I know Mr. Quintero has announced he's running, and I have, but Mr. Yusefian has not. So, my question is to you, is that merely wishful thinking on your part, or do you know something we don't know?
Is the third option both?
My next comment is on a more serious note. The points raised by Mr. Philpott are very legitimate points to be raised. I think when we looked at revenue issues a month ago, 6 weeks ago, whenever it was, I think we made it clear that the minor adjustments to revenue enhancements were not going to get us out of our financial issues for this fiscal year, or for the anticipated coming fiscal year. So clearly, it's going to involve additional cuts in expenses. We will get to it. None of these issues are beyond being solved by this council. It is going to be tough. It is not going to be very happy, but in these financial times, not many people are happy. The important thing is that we will get through this. We will have a balanced budget, and we will do our best in prioritizing the services that we want to maintain to provide to our residents. And Mr. Starbird, will this be taken up in our general budget cycle, which is March, or?
No, you'll be getting a report before the end of the calendar year on this year's current budget and our estimate of where it will likely end the year, and steps needed to keep it in balance if steps are needed.
Okay. Will that be in the form of a study session or an agenda item?
In the form of a study session.
Okay. So
And our expected date is December 2nd. It's a tentative date.
So this council is going to roll up our sleeves and get into it. There are no sacred cows, as far as I'm concerned, in the city budget. But the important thing is to maintain our priorities. And each of us perhaps have slightly different priorities as to where we want to maintain services to the residents. Rita Unikian, who is bothering you? You can tell us. It's not fair that someone bothers you or tries to get you to say things. I take that seriously. I really do. And I take it serious on both ends. If counsel's the one badgering someone or intimidating, that's wrong. But likewise, anyone else from the public taking advantage of you, you say because your English is not the greatest, they're giving you things to read, you feel free that you can come to any of us privately, and we'll help you solve the problem.
No, when is next time is the thanks until Mr. Mayor.
Okay. You don't have to answer, but we're here to help you, any one of us, or staff that you feel comfortable with. Whether we agree with your issues of rent control or not, it's not fair to take advantage of you in any way. So thank you. Thank you for letting us know. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Najarian. I would only add to that Ms. Unikian, if someone gives you something to read that you don't want to read, you also don't have to read it. So remember that as well. Mr. Quintero. Nothing. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
We were given, Mr. City Attorney, we were given this notice. It's a notice to intent to circulate petition? Is this a legitimate notice? Has it been given to you?
No, the city attorney does not have it. There was only enough copies for the council members, as well as I retained one for our record.
We'll take a look at it.
Would you let me know? Because the way I'm written, I think it's stupid.
Mr. All right, would you let us know? Mr. Kasakian.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Mr. Christopher, who spoke last during oral communications, touched upon the issue of filming and it being considered a part of the arts. I could not agree with him more. Our rates for filming, which our department, City Clerk's Department, is in charge of processing those permits for filmings, our rates are probably some of the most competitive in the entire Southland, if not the state. In fact, they're a little too competitive, and we're going to have to review those and adjust them accordingly. But there's a discount available for students who are making films. A filming permit for students is only $100. And in addition to doing outreach to students, I can agree with him more. That's important to allow students to practice their craft here in Glendale. The city clerk's office, myself personally, go to the AFI Institute every year and speak to their freshman class as part of a roundtable. We're the only charter city that does that, along with Film LA and a couple of other organizations that talk to students about filming in cities, working with municipalities and government agencies in being able to film at these locations. We've been doing that for the last 2 years, and we've established a relationship with them, and we want to get these budding Steven Spielbergs to be, while they're still young, filming in Glendale, so they'll come here to film their blockbusters, hopefully, as well.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kasakian. Any other staff comments? No? Yes, sir.
Margaret, probably shoot me if I don't ask this question. Mr. Zern, could you please answer her question? She's asked 3 times already.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the question was when will it start? It has started.
And when will it end? I think was the other half of it.
It's scheduled for Christmas. Done by Christmas.
Christmas. You get a Christmas gift, Margaret.
Christmas 08.
All right.
08, not 09, 08.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have some new business.
Yes, we do.
And I think it's Mr. Najarian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the lawsuit entitled City of Glendale versus Oxford Sales et al., case number EC 045932, consolidated with case number EC 043715, be compromised and settled, and the same be and is hereby approved and accepted for a total amount of $34,000 to be paid to the City of Glendale for recovery of workers' compensation benefits paid to 3 City of Glendale employees injured in a vehicular accident occurring on November 30th, 2005, and for the value of the City of Glendale vehicle damaged in said accident. Second, the city attorney is hereby authorized to execute all dismissals and releases necessary to effectuate the aforesaid settlement.
Took that long. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? There is and appears to be none. Mr. City Clerk.
Council members Najarian?
Yes.
Quintero?
Yes.
Weaver? Yusefian?
Aye.
Mayor Draymond?
Yes.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. We're adjourned. Thank you.